In a world defined by the extraordinary, vast labyrinths stretch deep underground, teeming with horrifying monsters and guarded treasures that glitter in the dark. This is the essence of a true fantasy realm. Yet, there is another kind of fantasy, the enduring bond of a childhood friendship between a boy and a girl, a connection that spans years and defies the simple passage of time. A young woman with sharp, ridged horns and pale hair watches with a steady, expectant gaze, her presence hinting at a power far beyond her unassuming attire. Deep within a treacherous dungeon, Van grips his blade with white-knuckled intensity, facing down a savage pack of beastmen and winged terrors that block his path. He moves in a blur of steel and determination, cutting through the monstrous horde with a series of precise, powerful strikes that send his foes reeling. The 17-year-old swordsman pauses to catch his breath, his body strained, but his resolve unshaken as he nears the goal he has ventured so far to reach. The defeated guardian, a massive minotaur slumped against the stone wall, wheezes out a reluctant admission of defeat, granting the intruder passage to the deepest part of the labyrinth. As he steps into the final chamber, a pair of colossal, leathery wings unfurl with a thunderous snap, revealing the true master of this subterranean domain. The Black Dragon King, Obsidian, looms over the young man, its voice a deep, ancient rumble that acknowledges his arrival at the heart of the dragon's lair. She looms over him, her voice booming with an ancient, formal weight as she commends the young man for reaching her inner sanctum. Van, however, can only offer a strained grunt, his face slick with perspiration under the dragon's intense gaze. Instead of being intimidated, he points out that she is actually the one sweating profusely. The dragon's majestic aura instantly shatters, her eyes widening in a mix of shock and embarrassment as she tries to hush his blunt observation. Seizing the moment of broken tension, he asks if she could use those massive wings to fan him, complaining about the sweltering heat outside the dungeon. With a resigned sigh, she begins to flap her wings, creating a powerful gust that nearly knocks him back. As the cool air washes over him, he questions the necessity of her archaic speech and her choice to remain in such a massive form. She admits that the breeze feels so good she's lost all desire to return to her human shape, much to his exasperation. She eventually confesses that her dramatic display was merely an attempt to surprise him, given how long it had been since their last meeting. He stares at her, baffled by the logic of a dragon king trying to play a prank on an old friend. With a sudden surge of light and energy, she initiates her transformation, the massive draconic silhouette shrinking and shifting as she releases her true form. Emerging from the fading light, she greets him with a casual wave and a simple greeting, her terrifying presence replaced by a familiar, friendly face. He responds in kind, handing over a gift his mother sent along for her. He then presents her with a selection of vegetables, prompting an immediate protest about her draconic diet being strictly carnivorous. He remains firm, lecturing her on the importance of a balanced nutritional intake, while she reluctantly accepts the greens. Walking side by side through the stone corridors, he offers her a refreshing drink to combat the heat. Despite her status as the formidable Black Dragon King and his reputation as the only warrior to ever conquer this dungeon, they look like nothing more than two companions sharing a quiet moment. They eventually settle down in a comfortable room, the tension of the dungeon long forgotten. It is here, in the quiet intimacy of their shared history, that the truth of their bond is most evident. They are not just rivals or legends, but childhood friends. She looked at him with concern, wondering if her subordinates had been too much for him to handle during his trek through the dungeon. He sighed, explaining that while they always attacked him upon arrival, he actually felt guilty for having to defeat them every single time he came to visit, as they were only doing their jobs. He was unaware that the very monsters he spoke of were huddled just around the corner, eavesdropping on the conversation with bruised faces and bandaged heads. They whispered among themselves, acknowledging that while he was their king's friend, their duty as dungeon guardians compelled them to strike at any intruder, regardless of the outcome. The group tried to keep their voices low, though the Minotaur among them was particularly distraught by the situation. He took his role as a guardian with immense pride, lamenting their repeated failure to ward off the visitor despite their best efforts to fulfill their professional obligations to the dungeon. They watched as the two friends shared a light-hearted laugh, noting the bittersweet nature of the pair's relationship. Having known each other for a decade, the vast distance between their homes meant these cherished meetings only occurred once a month, a fact the monsters found surprisingly touching. The sight of such pure, long-standing affection moved the hardened dungeon dwellers to tears. They found the display of youthful childhood friendship incredibly wholesome, with the older monsters even reflecting wistfully on their own pasts and the beauty of such a bond. He began to gather his things and pull on his gloves, announcing that it was time for him to head back home. This news clearly disappointed his host, who had already prepared a special game for them to play and felt it was far too early for their time together to come to an end. She asked tentatively if he would be returning the following month, but the eavesdropping monsters had far more scandalous thoughts. Their imaginations ran wild, misinterpreting the innocent exchange as a prelude to a much more intimate overnight stay, leaving them flustered and shocked. He realized he had forgotten to mention a crucial detail, catching her off guard with a sudden pause. When she questioned his change in plans, he simply smiled and told her that they could play her game as soon as tomorrow, hinting at a major change in his circumstances. The young man revealed his grand surprise. He had officially joined the Adventurers Guild and moved into the town located right at the dungeon's entrance. The proximity meant he would no longer be a rare visitor, but a permanent neighbor who could drop by whenever he pleased. His announcement, while joyful for his friend, struck absolute terror into the hearts of the listening monsters. They realized with dawning horror that if he visited every day, they were destined to be beaten to a pulp on a daily basis for the foreseeable future. He and the other dungeon dwellers watch from the sidelines as Ryuka teases Van about his decision to move closer. She playfully suggests that he must have been incredibly lonely without her, a sentiment that leaves him sighing in reluctant agreement. He admits, with a sheepish look, that he was indeed quite lonely. Seeing his honesty, she softens her tone and warmly invites him to visit whenever he likes, acknowledging that their frequent meetings are now an inevitable part of their lives. They exchange farewells as the day draws to a close, promising to see each other again tomorrow. She watches him walk away, her tail swishing slightly as she reflects on the peculiar nature of their relationship, an odd pair of childhood friends bound by the walls of a dungeon. Once he is out of sight, she can no longer contain her joy, her face flushing a deep red as she clutches her hands to her chest in a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. Behind her, the dungeon's guardians are nearly overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of her radiant happiness, their voices rising in a collective cry at how incredibly adorable their king has become. With the sun setting on their encounter, the heavy footsteps of the monsters echo through the stone corridors as they begin the trek back to their designated guard posts. They have a long, busy day ahead of them, preparing for the inevitable arrival of their daily visitor. The massive bullman rallies his fellow guardians, his fist clenched in a gesture of unwavering support for the blossoming bond between the two childhood friends. The orc and goblin beside him cheer in agreement, their spirits lifted by the romantic tension they've just witnessed. Despite their enthusiasm, they cannot ignore the grim reality of their situation. Supporting this relationship means enduring a daily thrashing at the hands of the powerful adventurer. They resign themselves to the physical pain, noting that while they will be beaten to a pulp, it is a small price to pay to help their comrade, who seems to find a strange sort of satisfaction in the struggle. He and his fellow monsters watched from the shadows as their sovereign basked in the afterglow of the encounter. She hummed a sweet, melodic tune, her eyes crinkling with a warmth that transformed her usual regal bearing into one of pure, unadulterated joy. Deep within the bottom floor of a certain dungeon, the Council of Monsters gathers for their regular briefing. The Dragon Queen sits upon her throne, presiding over her generals as they prepare to deliver their reports on the state of their domain. The Orc General begins the briefing, noting that 37 C-rank adventurers infiltrated the lower floors yesterday. While they were successfully repelled and some mana was recovered, the Wolf General suggests it might be time to upgrade the traps, as even novices are making it surprisingly far into the depths. Despite the gravity of the security breach, she remains silent, her figure cast in shadow as the generals discuss whether the 1st Division should handle the next wave. They turn to her for guidance, but she offers no response, appearing completely detached from the conversation. Her subordinates call out to her again, but the Dragon Queen is completely lost in thought. Her eyes are glazed over, staring into the distance as the name of her title echoes through the hall without reaching her consciousness. Seeing her lack of focus, the elf assistant and the other generals exchange worried glances. They realize she has been constantly checking the clock, her mind clearly elsewhere while the business of the dungeon continues around her, leaving them to wonder what could be so distracting. Suddenly, her heart skips a beat as she realizes the time. She blurts out an exclamation, her face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and anticipation, though she quickly tries to deny that she is waiting for anyone in particular or that the arrival of a certain human matters to her. The elf assistant teases her, suggesting that since she'll be seeing him every day now, she should try to make some progress in their relationship. The Dragon Queen reacts with defensive frustration, insisting that it is not like that at all, even as her flustered state betrays her true feelings. As the conversation continues, her mind drifts back 10 years to a stormy night when she was separated from her family. Injured and unable to fly or disguise herself, the young dragon had huddled alone in the rain, crying out for her parents in a state of total, helpless despair. It was then that a young boy had found her. Despite her monstrous form, he had approached with kindness rather than fear, offering help and eventually rescuing her from the cold. Over the days and weeks that followed, their initial wariness turned into a deep bond of friendship as they played together every day. Eventually, he had set out on a difficult journey specifically to help her find her way back home. When they finally succeeded, they shared a tearful farewell, both grateful for the time they spent together and the family she had regained, leaving a lasting mark on both their lives that neither would ever forget. She remembers the promise made in their youth, when he vowed to visit her home next. That memory became the catalyst for her entire life's path. She ascended to the position of a dungeon boss specifically, so he would have a reason to grow stronger and seek her out. Back in the present, the Dragon Queen's cheeks flush a deep crimson as she remains lost in the sweetness of that distant memory. Her usual stoic mask has completely crumbled, replaced by the soft, longing expression of a girl in love. Suddenly realizing her lapse in composure, she snaps at her subordinates, her voice high and defensive. She insists with frantic energy that they are merely childhood friends and that there is absolutely nothing more to the story, though her flustered demeanor suggests otherwise. Her generals are far from convinced, teasing her about the romanticized version of her past and how her current expression would surely shock the man in question. Enraged by their mockery, she undergoes a partial, terrifying transformation, her head becoming that of a massive, snarling dragon as she roars for them to silence themselves and pay attention. The tense atmosphere is broken by the chime of the dungeon's alarm, signaling a new arrival. When the generals inquire about the day's tally, they learn that 20 intruders have already been dealt with, but this latest one is different. This vast labyrinth, known to the world as Wyrm Hell, consists of 100 floors teeming with lethal traps and monstrous guardians. While the official guild records state that even the most elite adventurers have only ever reached the 48th floor, the true depths of the dungeon remain a mystery to all but its masters. Observing her restless behavior, the orc general points out how obvious it is when the specific adventurer they are waiting for arrives. He tells her there is no need to be so visibly shaken, as her excitement is practically radiating off her. The magical broadcast system begins a rapid-fire succession of alerts, announcing that floors 1 through 8 have been breached in staggering time. Realizing the redundancy of the announcements, the petite assistant silences the system just as the massive bull general confirms the intruder's identity. With the target identified, the generals prepare to take their positions, offering their queen a bit of privacy for her long-awaited reunion. They jokingly suggest they will try to stall him for at least 10 minutes before they inevitably fail to stop his progress. Left alone in the quiet of the throne room, she finds herself unable to stay still, her heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She adjusts her stance, waiting for the one person who has been the focus of her life for the last 10 years to finally step through the doors. She is startled by his sudden appearance, her eyes wide as he casually greets her with a simple, relaxed greeting. He asks how her adventurer registration went, wondering if he has interrupted something important, but she quickly assures him that everything is perfectly fine. The young man begins to chuckle to himself, prompting her to ask what is so amusing, though he simply dismisses it as a passing thought about their situation. He remarks that being together feels just like old times and promises to return to the dungeon the following day, leaving her momentarily stunned by the casual declaration. He continues by noting how she must have been lonely cooped up in the dungeon all this time, a comment that causes her to blush and snap back in defensive embarrassment. This playful bickering triggers a shared memory of their childhood, a time when a young boy and a small dragon laughed together under the open sky. Back in the present, the two of them share a genuine, light-hearted laugh. The tension of the dungeon raid completely evaporated as they reconnect. Watching from the shadows, the dungeon's loyal generals are moved to tears, overwhelmed with joy and relief at seeing their mistress finally happy. Following their heartfelt reconciliation, she turns away to demonstrate a practical detail of her daily life. Lifting the hem of her shirt, she reveals how her thick, scaly tail fits through a specialized opening in her shorts, explaining the necessity of such tailored garments for her draconic physiology. In a quiet corner of the dungeon, a fierce battle of wits unfolds, though the stakes are merely cardboard and ink. Ryuka beams with pride, declaring her victory certain now that she has assembled a diverse team of heroines, including an elf queen and its Sundra knight. Van, however, is far from defeated. He counters her boast by revealing his own formidable hand, featuring a master wizard and the legendary beast Fenrir, sending his standing in the game soaring. Watching from a distance, the dungeon's high-ranking guardians remain hidden in the shadows, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. They whisper among themselves, unable to comprehend the strange ritual their queen and her human companion are performing with such intensity. The two friends remain completely absorbed in their pastime, sitting cross-legged on the stone floor with the game board spread between them. While they enjoy this rare moment of peace, the wolf and bull generals continue to peer through the arched doorway, struggling to reconcile this domestic scene with the fierce nature of their ruler. He rolls the dice, the small cubes clattering across the board as he tallies his move. He patiently explains the core loop of the game, titled Reincarnation, where players must gather allies and fight through various trials to achieve the strongest possible rebirth. The narrative of the game takes a darker turn as he describes a scenario of betrayal and loss. He explains that in this world, being fired by one's party or robbed of all possessions isn't the end. Instead, it triggers a revenge buff, a mechanic designed to empower the persecuted and allow them to claw their way back to the top. She lets out a bright, genuine laugh, her draconic tail swishing with excitement as she plays. Observing her joy, the wolf general admits that seeing the Lady Dragon Queen so happy is a positive thing, though the bull general remains wary, noting that the game's focus on betrayal and hardship seems like a grim way to simulate life. Her mood shifts from playful to vengeful as a specific event occurs on the board. She gleefully announces the activation of mass murder mode, triggered because her heroine was stolen by a rival hero, leaving the watching generals horrified by the sheer ruthlessness of the game's mechanics. The arrival of the harpy and the siren shifts the atmosphere once again, as they descend with a flurry of feathers and a teasing air. Harpy, clutching her guitar, dismisses the game's lack of sexiness and bluntly points out that despite being 17, the two friends have made no romantic progress, a comment that hangs heavy in the air. A sudden, awkward silence descends upon the room as the two players process the harpy's pointed observation. The playful competitive energy vanishes, replaced by a growing awareness of the space between them. They both turn toward each other, their faces flushing a deep crimson as the realization of their mutual feelings finally breaks through their usual camaraderie. The wholesome nature of their friendship is suddenly charged with a new, undeniable tension. She leans in close to him, her face flushed with a heat she cannot explain. With a trembling voice, she confesses that her chest feels tight and pleads for him to find a way to soothe the strange ache within her. Watching from the shadows, the winged minion is overcome with a feverish excitement, her imagination running wild until a sudden nosebleed marks the intensity of her delusions. Her frantic energy is interrupted when the wolf-like general steps forward to question her intentions. He voices his stern disapproval, his brow furrowed as he declares that pushing for such a scandalous development is not the proper way for their relationship to evolve. The general continues his lecture, explaining that he finds more value in observing the slow, bittersweet progression of their bond. He warns that forcing them into an indecent situation would only shatter their friendship, depriving the observers of the simple joy of watching them flirt. His sentiment is echoed by the petite assistant, who admits she also prefers to watch from a distance, while the massive bull-headed general agrees that succumbing to such base voyeurism would make them failures as loyal subordinates. Despite the reprimand, the harpy remains deeply moved by the depth of the Dragon Queen's long-held emotions, insisting that after a decade of silent longing, her mistress deserves to find true happiness, even if it requires a bit of a push. Unwilling to participate in her schemes, the wolf general turns to depart, stating firmly that he will not be a part of anything he deems inappropriate. Even as he leaves, she remains undeterred, her expression twisting into a manic grin as she fixates on the idea of witnessing a scene of pure, inflamed passion. Her obsession earns her a sharp insult from the bull general, who remains unimpressed by her antics. Ignoring the warnings, she prepares her acoustic guitar, her eyes wide with a chaotic resolve that leaves the assistant trembling with worry. The bull general, sensing the impending noise, advises the others to shield their ears from the coming performance. She strikes the strings with a jarring intensity, the loud chords echoing through the stone halls in a desperate attempt to set a romantic tone. The sudden cacophony leaves the two subjects of her meddling staring in bewildered annoyance, wondering how such a racket could possibly be intended to improve the mood. She has unleashed a sonic assault so potent it leaves the group reeling. Ven clutches his temples, his mind spinning from the sheer volume, while the generals behind him struggle to maintain their composure against the cacophony. Amidst the noise, he turns his attention to the Dragon Queen, calling out her name with a desperate intensity. She looks back at him, her cheeks flushed with a sudden, unexpected heat as the world around them seems to narrow down to just the two of them. They remain locked in a silent, charged gaze, momentarily oblivious to the chaos. Behind them, the generals are reduced to trembling wrecks, their senses overwhelmed by the persistent, jarring vibrations. The screeching intensifies, a jagged wall of sound that forces them to speak in hushed, strained tones. He wonders aloud what could possibly possess their companion to produce such an awful noise, while she can only speculate that it might be some form of misguided practice. As the group begins to move, the lingering ache in his head serves as a grim reminder of the performance. He reflects on the rarity of such sounds, questioning the motivation behind the song, even as the wolf general begrudgingly admits the sheer power of the screech. This particular brand of avian demi-human belongs to a lineage often misunderstood by those outside the dungeon. In this world, the winged folk are divided into two distinct and opposing categories based on their vocal gifts. On one side are the sirens, whose beauty and enchanting melodies can lead the unwary into a state of total madness. On the other are the harpies, described in ancient lore as horrifying creatures with screeches like carrion birds, far removed from the grace of their musical cousins. The realization hits her like a physical blow, her eyes wide with a sudden, crushing clarity. She finally understands that she is not a creature of song, but one of the awful ones, a fact the others bluntly point out is inherent in her very name. Despite the stinging critique from the wolf general, who labels the entire endeavor a moronic failure, she refuses to yield. While the others suggest abandoning their interference, she shouts her defiance, her spirit unbroken even if her musical reputation is in tatters. Their bickering is cut short as the Dragon Queen looms over them, her expression one of cold, simmering fury. She demands an explanation for their meddling, singling out the massive bull general as the group of conspirators shrinks back, their secret observation finally exposed. Ryuka is livid. She looms over the cowering group, her voice dripping with venom as she accuses them of spying on her. The air around her thickens with a palpable, murderous intent, and her hand begins to shift, morphing into a massive, scaly dragon claw that cracks the floor beneath her weight. Seeing the situation spiraling, Vin steps in, placing himself near her and urging her to take it easy on the terrified subordinates. Despite his intervention, she remains a tempest of rage, her draconic aura flaring wildly while the generals tremble in the shadow of her wrath. He quickly pivots, suggesting that instead of conflict, they should all simply play the game together. The tension breaks slightly as he offers a warm, inviting smile. She huffs, her anger cooling into a reluctant, grumbling acceptance of the new arrangement. Nearby, the generals huddle together, whispering about the sudden change in plans. They debate the logistics of a six-person game, noting that between the massive frames of the bull and the orc, the space is going to be incredibly tight. Yet they can't help but feel a sense of relief at the de-escalation. The group suddenly surges forward with a boisterous cry, eager to begin the festivities. In the scramble to find a spot around the board, Ryuka finds herself caught in the middle of the throng, complaining about the lack of personal space as the dice begin to roll and the game officially commences. As the game gets underway, the atmosphere shifts to one of focused competition. They are deep into a complex role-playing scenario involving a villain's daughter in an uninhabited island, with Harpy carefully considering her next move, while Ryuka and Van sit shoulder to shoulder in the cramped quarters. Watching the two of them, the generals can't help but wear wide, knowing grins, finding the sight of their queen's domesticity heartwarming. She barks at them to wipe the looks off their faces, her cheeks flushing crimson as she tries to ignore how closely she is pressed against Van's side. She watches in stunned silence as the massive bull man loses himself in the game. He bellows out his character's convoluted history, claiming to be a reincarnated minotaur who achieved legendary status and is now seeking a peaceful life while fending off jealous rivals. The intensity of his performance is palpable, leaving the rest of the group, including the orc beside him, sweat-drenched and slightly bewildered by his sudden passion for the tabletop narrative. Ryuka hands over a heavy stack of volumes, insisting that these are essential reading. She warns him that once he starts, he won't be able to stop, even offering to lend him up to the 9th volume to ensure he's fully hooked. She watches him go as he takes the heavy bag, waving a casual goodbye. Before he disappears, she calls out one last firm reminder that he had better actually read them. She remains quiet as the young man disappears from sight, while her loyal generals gather around to note how another precious day has passed. Her thoughts are clearly still lingering on the departure. She suddenly lets out a heavy, dramatic sigh, her hands clenching as a wave of self-doubt washes over her. This abrupt shift in her mood catches the surrounding guardians off guard. The Dragon Queen is teased by her subordinates, who find her concern endearing and call her delicate despite her status. She frets aloud, wondering if she was too pushy or if the sheer volume of books will simply annoy him. She is stunned when the Harpy offers a blunt solution to the distance: marriage. The winged girl argues that such a union would allow for constant companionship, though the Dragon Queen quickly realizes the suggestion is just a ploy to watch him read. Watching as the winged performer flies off excitedly, she hears the girl claim to have a specialized tool that might ease these anxieties. She is presented with a peculiar invention by the Orc General, who unveils a magical monitor crafted from salvaged dungeon components. He proudly explains that this device, featuring a 32-inch organic display, was designed specifically for surveillance. The Queen looks on as the device flickers to life, showing a clear image of the young man in real time without his knowledge. The generals explain its features, including the ability to record his every move like a sophisticated crystal ball. She stares at the screen with a look of pure discomfort, making it clear that she does not share their voyeuristic tendencies. She firmly states that she has no interest in peeping on others, setting herself apart from her subordinates' questionable methods. The night is still, with a crescent moon hanging over the quiet landscape of the dungeon's exterior. She had claimed to reject the monitor, yet here she sits, bathed in its artificial glow while the young man reads peacefully by candlelight in his own quarters. Her heart begins to race as she watches him through the screen. He stretches and yawns, announcing to the empty room that he has finally finished the book she gave him. He offers a quiet word of praise for her taste in literature, noting how good the story was before deciding it is time to sleep, leaving her face flushed with a deep, embarrassed heat. The following morning, he meets her with a smile, confirming how much he enjoyed the story and promising to start the next volume immediately, much to the delight of the observing generals who feel their plan is working. After bidding him farewell, she finds herself caught in the middle of a squabble between her subordinates, as the winged girl demands a turn with the monitor while the orc dismisses her curiosity, calling her a stupid bird. Once the others depart to find their own entertainment on the upper floors, she settles back onto the floor, her eyes immediately drawn back to the glowing display. She watches him go about his day, a soft smile touching her lips as she listens to the faint sound of him humming a cheerful tune to himself through the magical device. 3 days pass in this manner, and her concern grows as she observes his habits, even going so far as to mutter advice to the screen about his lack of protein and his preference for vegetables. The obsession has taken its toll, leaving her with hollow eyes and a weary expression as she remains tethered to the magical window, unable to look away from his every move. She remains hunched over the glowing monitor, her posture that of a dedicated stalker as she watches the young man on the screen hum a simple tune. This obsessive vigil is suddenly interrupted when her generals burst into the room, their faces twisted in shock as they demand to know what their queen is doing. Startled and blushing, she tries to justify her actions, explaining that she suspected he was hiding a secret partner, while her subordinates realize just how extreme her fixation has become. As they turn their attention to the screen, they notice he looks uncharacteristically somber, though she quickly dismisses their concern as a mere trick of the light. They suggest his sullenness might stem from late-night reading, even hinting that she should check her own reflection, but she ignores them, her gaze locked onto his every movement. The focus shifts as two guild adventurers, whom the dungeon's guardians recognize from previous encounters, approach him to ask about his gloomy mood. He admits to them that his childhood friend has been feeling unwell lately, a revelation that immediately piques the interest of the eavesdropping monsters. One of the adventurers reacts with pure disbelief at the mention of a female childhood friend, while she watches with a smug, self-assured grin, confident in her connection to him. The man continues to spiral into a state of shock over the existence of such a relationship, leaving the dungeon's generals baffled by his intense reaction to a simple fact. Finally, the desperate adventurer begs for an introduction, causing him to recoil in confusion while she and her generals watch the pathetic display with a mix of annoyance and bewilderment. He remained the target of the bold general's mounting rage, as the massive guardian practically foamed at the mouth while imagining the young man leading scum toward his queen. The general roared that he would never allow such a thing, vowing to beat the life out of anyone who dared try to approach her. The young adventurer, however, was already handling the situation with a firm hand, Facing his fellow peers, he flatly refused their desperate pleas for an introduction, insisting that a meeting with his childhood friend was simply out of the question. As the knight dragged his dejected companion away, telling him to stop bothering the newcomer, he could only offer a silent, apologetic look. He knew his refusal was for the best, even if it seemed harsh to his peers. He reasoned that bringing his seniors all the way to the dungeon's bottom floor was an impossibility, unaware that his actions were being cheered on by the dungeon's guardians. They lauded him for shielding the Dragon Queen from such evil influences, while she sat nearby, her face flushing a deep crimson at the praise. Seeing her mistress's obvious discomfort, the petite elf assistant suggested that perhaps it was time to stop this clandestine observation and simply speak with him directly. The orc general chimed in, agreeing that a face-to-face conversation would be far more productive than constant worrying. She immediately bristled at the suggestion, stammering that she was merely curious and certainly not stalking him. But her protest was cut short when the young man on the screen suddenly froze, his gaze sharpening as if he had sensed a presence watching him from the shadows. Before anyone could react, he reached out and touched the screen, triggering a sharp, electronic beep. The room fell into a stunned silence as the group realized their secret surveillance had been discovered. The orc general realized they had underestimated the boy's perception, explaining that the magical energy required to transmit the image must have tipped him off. He marveled at the fact that the human's senses were now sharp enough to surpass even his own, leaving the Dragon Queen looking increasingly flustered. She stood there trembling, her eyes wide with a mix of guilt and mounting panic as the reality of the situation set in. With a desperate cry, she lunged forward and shattered the monitor, sealing the connection in a burst of violent energy. She wept openly, her face buried in her hands as she lamented her own actions. The thought of seeing her in such a state, glaring through the monitor, was too much to bear. Beside her, the orc general offered a clumsy but well-meaning pat on the back, while the elf assistant looked on with a mixture of pity and amusement at their queen's dramatic display of regret. This moment of vulnerability brought back memories of a quieter time, when the two of them sat together over old tomes. He had noticed the dark circles under her eyes, questioning if her late-night reading was the cause of her exhaustion. Flustered and clutching a book to her chest, she had struggled to find an excuse, only for him to gently reassure her that he never minded sharing his collection with her, even suggesting he would have explicitly invited her if he knew she was so interested. Rubbing her weary eyes, the Dragon Queen tried to shake off the lingering embarrassment of her recent outburst. The weight of her secret observations and the fear of being discovered by her childhood friend continued to gnaw at her, leaving her visibly drained and restless. The stone archway of the dungeon loomed ahead, a dark maw leading deep into the earth. Van stood before the entrance, a lone figure prepared to descend once more into the labyrinthine depths. He stepped onto the cold stone stairs, his movements practiced and steady. Another day meant another floor to clear, a routine he had mastered as he made his way toward the bottom, driven by his bond with the Dragon Queen. Suddenly, the silence of the corridors was shattered as he charged headlong into a pack of monsters. With a display of raw, brute force, he tore through their ranks, his blade a blur as he refused to let anything slow his descent. Once the path was clear, he continued his journey, his mind wandering to the simple pleasures that awaited him. He wondered if Ryuko would prefer a quiet afternoon of fishing or perhaps a game of cards once his work for the day was finished. Deep within the cavernous expanse of the 27th floor, a pair of predatory eyes watched his approach from the shadows. The hidden observer noted the adventurer's arrival, her presence masked by the jagged rocks of the cave. A piercing scream suddenly echoed through the damp air, catching him off guard. As he turned toward the sound, the figure in the shadows smiled to herself, confident that her prey had finally fallen into her trap. He rushed toward the source of the cry and found a young woman cowering on the ground, her clothes torn as she claimed to have been abandoned by her companions. Though he offered her healing herbs and prepared to move on, she reached out, desperately pleading for him to stay. He felt her cling to his arm, her eyes wide with feigned terror as she begged not to be left alone in the dark. Despite knowing that Ryuko was waiting for him, he found he couldn't simply abandon someone in such a state, unaware that the girl was secretly reveling in the success of her deception. Without a second thought, he hoisted her up into his arms, deciding the fastest way to help was to carry her out himself. His sudden burst of speed caught her completely off guard, forcing her to struggle to maintain her composure as he sprinted through the dungeon with ease. As they moved, she steeled her resolve, her true nature as a succubus hidden behind her mask of vulnerability. She was determined to defeat this troublesome human and prove her worth to the Dragon Queen, no matter how unexpected his strength might be. She feigns exhaustion, her voice trailing off as she suggests staying a bit longer in the dungeon, but he remains focused on the task at hand, urging her toward the surface before nightfall. He can't shake the feeling that something is amiss with her behavior, which only serves to infuriate her. She lashes out, mocking his lack of social grace and his apparent lack of a romantic life to hide her own frustration. Hidden within the rocky crevices nearby, the dungeon's guardians observe the pair with growing unease, having come to check on the boy after his unusually late return from the lower floors. They quickly identify the woman as the newly appointed succubus general and are stunned by her blatant attempt to seduce him, a secret history known only to a select few who understand their true bond as childhood friends. The small assistant questions whether the Dragon Queen should be informed of this development, but the massive bull general shuts the idea down immediately, citing the delicate balance of the dungeon's secrets and the danger the boy would face if his identity were compromised. He becomes visibly enraged, his massive frame trembling and his teeth bared as the others look on in shock at his sudden, violent outburst of emotion. His hatred for her kind boils over as he rants about their manipulative nature, swearing to annihilate anyone who dares to interfere with the sacred bond between the two childhood friends. The orc general joins the group, acknowledging the bull's passion but advising restraint, just as the wolf general's attention is drawn back to the unfolding drama in the clearing below. Down in the clearing, the girl has thrown herself to the ground in a desperate, provocative display to win his sympathy, but he only looks down at her with a mixture of confusion and blunt indifference. He points directly at the intricate, dark markings etched onto her lower abdomen, forcing her to drop the act as he finally identifies her true nature as a succubus, much to her shock. He bluntly informs her that her attempts at seduction are failing miserably. The succubus, her true form now fully revealed, stammers in frustration, admitting she underestimated him despite his youthful appearance. Realizing her charms have no effect, she grows desperate, reflecting on her long history of failure. She has been cast out of countless dungeons, and this position was her final hope to prove her worth to the board. The desperation turns to pathetic tears as she clings to him, wailing for just a bit of his life essence to meet her quota. Behind them, the other generals watch the display with varying degrees of pity and annoyance, noting that she is far older than she looks. This display of raw, albeit pathetic, emotion strikes a chord with the massive bull general. He finds himself moved to tears, lamenting that he wishes their own dragon queen possessed even a fraction of this desperate assertiveness. Suddenly, he can take no more and erupts with a thunderous roar, declaring that the dungeon has no room for more tragic heroines. His sudden outburst startles everyone as he prepares to take matters into his own hands. With a massive swing of his fist, the bull general lunges at the young man, who narrowly avoids the devastating blow. Amidst the chaos, the general shouts that by surviving this trial, the intruder has proven his worthiness to proceed. He looms over the path, his face a mask of intense determination as he commands the boy to move forward. He bellows that the Lady Dragon Queen is waiting, effectively ending the confrontation with a forced exit. As the dust settles, the group of generals begins to depart, leaving the young man and his companions standing in the wake of the sudden shift. He turns back to the succubus, firmly telling her to cease her pursuit. She watches them go, her mind reeling from the absurdity of the situation. Meanwhile, the bull general quietly acknowledges the boy's strength, realizing that he never truly stood a chance against such power. To save face, the generals loudly proclaim that they are only stepping aside because the intruder is the queen's fated rival. They leave the succubus standing alone, completely baffled by the sudden change in the dungeon's hierarchy. She stood there, stunned, as the massive bull general offered an unexpected reprieve. He told her to take her time and simply do her best, reassuring her that a single failure wouldn't cost her her position. However, his kindness came with a stern warning. She was to stay far away from the young adventurer, Van. This sudden display of concern left her reeling, her face flushing a deep crimson as she processed his words. She recalled how he had shielded her with his own massive body earlier, and a startling realization began to take root. She couldn't help but wonder if the stoic general harbored secret feelings for her. While she remained lost in her romantic delusions, the wolf general grew increasingly restless, grumbling about wanting to return to witness the precious flirting between the intruders. Nearby, the dragon queen finally spotted her companions, waving them over with a sharp comment about how long they had taken to arrive. Upon reuniting, the young man let out a heavy, audible sigh of relief, which immediately drew a sharp look of annoyance from his draconic friend. He quickly tried to explain himself, claiming his reaction was merely the result of the immense tension finally leaving his body, though she remained skeptical of his dramatic display. Back in the shadows of the dungeon, the succubus clutched at her chest, her heart racing in a way she had never experienced before. A strange, fluttering sensation took hold of her as she struggled to understand the unfamiliar emotions swirling within her. Inside the bustling Adventurers Guild, the air is thick with the smell of sweat and old parchment. A sign clearly outlines the economy of the trade. Monster parts, rare treasures, and precious metals are all exchanged here for cold, hard coin. He stands amidst the crowd, listening as a seasoned knight explains the current state of affairs. Most of the lucrative contracts have already been snatched up, with the majority of veterans setting their sights on the perilous WIRM hell, leaving the local dungeons surprisingly quiet. The young man absorbs this information, realizing that his options for work outside the dungeon's depths are dwindling. His companion clarifies that for those just starting out, the path to wealth begins on the upper floors, gathering simple healing herbs for a few measly pennies. Later, while resting against a stone wall, the Dragon Queen reminds him that the movements of adventurers are beyond her concern or permission. He admits his hesitation, explaining that he had hoped to find something of value within her domain to justify his efforts. She leans in, curious about what specific spoils he seeks, while he consults a crumpled list of requirements. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she describes her own arrangement. She claims the adventurer's gear and mana as her prize, while they are free to scavenge whatever treasures they can carry. He scans the market rates for various monster drops, noting the meager prices for herbs and lizard tails compared to the high value of minotaur horns and harpy feathers. Beside him, she watches his reaction, her expression unreadable as he calculates the risks. With a casual shrug, she offers up her own horns as a potential source of income, noting their high market value. In the background, her loyal generals react with sheer terror at her reckless suggestion, pleading for her to reconsider such a drastic move. The swordsman can't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the adventurers she routinely defeats, though she quickly dismisses his concern. She laughs, assuring him that her mana restores them afterward and that losing a horn is a small price to pay, leading him to suggest they explore an untouched floor to avoid interfering with others. Her face lights up with excitement as she grabs his hand, insisting they depart immediately for a special location she wants to reveal. The mention of a castle sparks a distant memory for him, recalling the days they spent playing games among the ruins. As they set off, he voices a lingering concern about the optics of their partnership, fearing that being seen together might tarnish her reputation as the Dragon Queen. She simply brushes the thought aside, her confidence unshaken by the potential for gossip. He walks alongside the Dragon Queen, noticing the unusual silence of the corridors. Ryuko observes that the monsters who usually patrol this area are nowhere to be found, suspecting they might be neglecting their duties in her absence. Unbeknownst to them, the absence is intentional, as the massive bull general directs a crowd of subordinates to relocate. He explains that the 27th floor requires urgent repairs after a recent disturbance, ordering everyone to move to a higher level for the time being to clear the path for their queen. The group of generals watches the pair from a distance, their expressions a mix of curiosity and duty. While they admit a desire to eavesdrop on the private conversation, they ultimately decide to focus on securing the perimeter to ensure their queen's rendezvous remains undisturbed. They eventually reach their destination, stopping before a weathered stone archway. With a sense of arrival, she announces that they have finally reached the spot she wanted to show him. Stepping through the threshold, they emerge into a vast, subterranean expanse on the 70th floor known as the Hidden Ruins. He gazes in awe at the crumbling pillars and scattered relics, admitting that despite his many travels through the dungeon, this secluded area had completely escaped his notice. The pair finds the area cluttered with debris and ancient artifacts, prompting him to suggest that the place could use a thorough cleaning. She explains that this was once her father's treasure hoard, the very man who built the dungeon, but she remains indifferent to the mess, claiming the treasure is not her responsibility. He then inquires about the current whereabouts of the former dungeon master. She laughs, explaining that since his retirement, her father has been traveling the world with her mother, simply enjoying his life to the fullest. While they watch from high above the ruins, the generals continue their clandestine observation, peering down from a stone balcony. The bold general encourages the others to help themselves to any treasure they find, viewing the snooping as a harmless perk of their watch. Their peaceful observation is suddenly shattered when a dark, viscous mass begins to manifest near the pair. Both of them sense the shift in the air, turning just as the generals above cry out in alarm, recognizing a threat they didn't expect to see here. It emerges as a grotesque, multi-eyed mana monster from the shadows, its form a chaotic blend of the dungeon's raw energy. It is an indiscriminate predator born from concentrated mana, a creature that normally haunts the middle floors and has no business appearing this deep in the ruins. It lunges forward, part of a ravenous tide of mana-born beasts threatening to tear the very foundations of the 70th floor apart. The dungeon's generals realize the gravity of the situation. If they don't act, the entire structure could collapse under the weight of the monsters. With a shared look of grim determination, the orc, wolf, bull, and elf assistants prepare for a desperate stand, vowing to protect their queen even at the cost of their lives as they charge into the fray. Amidst the chaotic clash of steel and claw, the young adventurer stands firm, his blade a blur as he commands the group to finish the fight quickly. While the generals engage the remaining monsters in the background, he remains the calm center of the storm, his focus unwavering. Nearby, the Dragon Queen watches the scene unfold, noting the efficiency with which the threat is being neutralized and wondering if the monsters were truly as unfriendly as they appeared. They observe his prowess from a short distance, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine awe at his combat ability. The generals, known collectively as the Board, realize that watching him fight to protect their queen is a revelation of his true potential. They conclude that from now on, the extermination of threats on the lower floors should be entrusted to him, acknowledging that his strength surpasses their combined might, and that he is the most capable guardian they have. As the dust begins to settle, a familiar figure approaches, her presence catching the battle-worn guardians by surprise. The succubus offers a casual greeting, explaining that she was simply on her way to work when the cacophony of battle drew her attention. The generals, particularly the bull, seem flustered by her sudden appearance in such a restricted area, questioning why she is there instead of at her post. She peers intently toward the lower levels, her curiosity piqued by the lingering energy of the conflict. The generals exchange uneasy glances, sensing a growing misunderstanding between the succubus and the bull general, who seems particularly protective. Despite the tension, the focus remains on the secrecy of the floor and the importance of the queen's private strategizing, which must not be disturbed. Suddenly, the massive bull general lunges forward, his large hands shielding her eyes in a frantic attempt to maintain the floor's secrets. He bellows a warning, insisting that she must not look at what lies below. The sudden movement startles the others, adding a touch of absurdity to the aftermath of the life-threatening encounter as he tries to force her away from the edge. He continues to hold her firmly, much to her visible annoyance as she questions the necessity of such an embrace. The orc general attempts to explain the situation, reiterating that the Dragon Queen utilizes this floor for absolute secrecy. Only the board is permitted to witness the events unfolding here, a rule they take with utmost seriousness to ensure the safety of their ruler's plans. They begin to move away, though the harpy expresses a lingering desire to stay and watch the pair a bit longer. She finds their dynamic entertaining and suspects they are up to something fun, while the bull general remains stiff and formal, clearly uncomfortable with the breach of protocol. The group eventually decides to give the queen and her companion the space they require, moving on to their next duties. Back at the site of the skirmish, the young man sheathes his weapon, declaring the last of the monsters defeated. The dragon queen teases him, calling him a show-off for his display of skill, though her smile betrays her pride. With the immediate danger past, their attention shifts back to the original goal, uncovering the treasures hidden within the ruins of the 70th floor. She dives into the hoard with infectious enthusiasm, examining ancient vases and even a decorative skull with glee. He watches her, amused, noting that she seems to be enjoying the treasure hunt far more than he is. She doesn't deny it, her laughter echoing through the chamber as she revels in the spoils of her father's hidden legacy, finding joy in the simple act of discovery. She excitedly points toward a massive treasure ship in the distance, but her companion notes its impractical size. As she moves to investigate another pile, her foot catches on a hidden object, sending her stumbling forward with a startled cry. The sudden fall lands her directly on top of him, their faces inches apart in the quiet of the treasure room. For a long moment, neither of them moves, the air thick with an unexpected and heavy silence. Her heart begins to hammer against her ribs, a rhythmic thumping that seems loud enough to echo through the chamber. He feels it too, his own pulse quickening as the realization of their proximity sinks in, while the hidden observers in the shadows can hardly contain their excitement. Overwhelmed by the heat rising in her cheeks, she wonders if he can feel her heart racing as fast as his own. With a frantic apology, she scrambles back, her mind a whirlwind of embarrassment and confusion over the sudden shock of the moment. The young man quickly tries to break the tension by pointing out the very thing that caused her to trip. She looks down, her initial fluster replaced by curiosity as she sees a metallic object half buried in the floor. Lifting the heavy prize, he marvels at the distinct sheen of legendary orichalcum, while she gasps in recognition. It is a meticulously crafted statue of her father, the former ruler of the dungeon, gleaming with a golden light. He asks if he might keep the find, and she, still unable to meet his eyes, gives her consent with a quiet mumble. She tries to regain her composure, though the lingering warmth in her face betrays her lingering thoughts. From their distant vantage point, the dungeon's generals watch the pair with a mix of frustration and begrudging respect. While some are disappointed the romantic tension didn't escalate further, others find the simple, wholesome nature of the exchange surprisingly touching. Sometime later, the young adventurer stands within the bustling halls of the Adventurers Guild, the orichalcum bust resting on a table before him. The sight of the legendary medal and the likeness of the dungeon's former master sends the gathered adventurers into a frenzy of greed and disbelief. He stood before the guild's reception desk, watching as the clerk's eyes nearly bulged out of her head upon appraising the artifact. When she shrieked that the statue was worth a staggering 2,000 gold pieces, the young adventurer recoiled in modest shock. Fumbling for words, he insisted that such a fortune was far more than he required. With a sheepish expression, he requested a mere 20 gold for his immediate needs and instructed the stunned official to donate the remaining vast sum to the guild's coffers, much to the silent observation of his hulking companion. Van walks through the bustling town streets, waving a friendly goodbye to a shopkeeper as he finishes his errands. He is so preoccupied with the thought of bringing a meat pie back for Ryuka that he fails to notice a young woman in his path, resulting in a sudden, clumsy collision. Because of the impact, he immediately begins to apologize, explaining that his excitement for being in town for the first time caused him to lose focus. The young woman, accompanied by a silent, armored knight, offers a warm smile and suggests that as fellow adventurers, they should look out for one another if they meet in the dungeon. He watches them depart, briefly wondering if the knight was a threat before realizing his own carelessness was the only cause of the incident. As they walk away, the girl quietly remarks to her companion that the young man they just encountered possesses a surprising amount of strength. Meanwhile, back at the dungeon, Ryuka stands with her arms crossed, a deep scowl etched onto her face as she broods over recent events. She huffs, her tail twitching with irritation as she complains to herself about Van's frustratingly dense nature and his lack of a proper reaction to her. Seeking an audience, she vents her frustrations to Harpy, who is currently occupied with tedious paperwork as a form of punishment. Her face flushes a deep crimson as the memory of tripping and landing directly on top of him flashes through her mind, fueling her internal turmoil. She is paralyzed by the memory, her face flushed a deep crimson as the succubus beside her continues to tease. The demoness remarks on what a marvelous sight it was, suggesting that a tiny bit more momentum would have resulted in a full-blown kiss. The Dragon Queen can only stare ahead in stunned silence, the sheer embarrassment of the situation leaving her momentarily speechless. Finding her voice at last, she lashes out at the gathered generals, vowing to punish the lot of them for their prying eyes later. The elf assistant immediately feigns ignorance, sweating profusely as she claims to have no idea what the commotion is even about. The harpy cuts through the excuses, pointing out that the real reason for the frustration is that Van seemed completely unaffected by the close encounter. As the realization of her master's mood sinks in, the orc and wolf generals feel a sudden, icy shiver of dread. She tries to deny it, but the harpy persists, noting that even if the accident was unintentional, the lack of any reaction from him is what truly stings. Stepping forward with a confident smirk, the succubus offers to take the lead, promising to educate her queen on the finer points of capturing a man's attention. The Dragon Queen watches with a skeptical glare, clearly unconvinced that her subordinate's expertise will lead to anything but more trouble. The demoness continues her lecture, explaining that for a man as dense as him, a more aggressive display of feminine charm is the only way to break through his oblivious shell. Horrified by the scandalous suggestion, she can only react with wide-eyed shock, her mind reeling at the thought of performing such bold acts. She finally loses her patience, screaming a flat refusal to follow such ridiculous advice while the succubus looks on, undeterred and proud of her provocative wisdom. She remains in a foul mood, her draconic tail twitching with irritation while her assistant sighs at the irrationality of the situation. Nearby, the harpy receives a scolding for her loud and unhelpful suggestions, though she seems entirely unfazed by the reprimand. Her irritation does nothing to stop the winged general, who leans in with wide, manic eyes, insisting that this is merely the prelude to a classic chance encounter. She argues that such moments are guaranteed to happen in any romantic tale, sparking a connection where none existed. She continues her frantic lecture, listing absurd scenarios like accidental body swaps or the consumption of illicit potions designed to heighten one's sensitivity. In her mind, even being treated as a nuisance by a loved one is a valid path to intimacy, much to the confusion of those around her. The harpy's explanation of how a single juicy event can bridge the gap between people draws a mix of skepticism and intrigue from the assistant. They agree to convene a formal board meeting later to strategize, hoping to use this opportunity to give their queen their full support. As her delusions spiral into scandalous visions of a disrobing adventurer, the Dragon Queen recoils in horror, mentally apologizing to the young man for her subordinate's intrusive thoughts. Her internal crisis is cut short by a sudden, jarring report. The dungeon's 45th floor has been breached. Her internal crisis is cut short as the heavy doors swing open and the wolf, bull, and orc generals march into the chamber. They offer a hasty apology for the intrusion, but their faces are grim as they deliver the news of an approaching enemy much earlier than anticipated. The wolf general reports that this intruder has shattered all previous records for reaching this depth, having already surpassed the 45th floor. The news leaves the winged general speechless, her earlier romantic fantasies replaced by the cold reality of an unprecedented threat. His report is punctuated by the sight of the corridors far below, which are engulfed in a violent inferno. It becomes immediately clear that this is not the familiar young adventurer they expected, but a powerful and unknown new force carving a path through the dungeon. Amidst the wreckage of the flames, the guardian of the floor, a massive inferno ogre, lies defeated. The intruder observes the fallen beast, noting that its strength explains why lesser adventurers never stood a chance against such a formidable foe. Standing over the fallen beast, a battle-scarred veteran with a stern gaze and a heavy blade prepares for the final ascent. Beside him, a young girl watches as he declares his intent to confront the Black Dragon Queen herself, confident that they are the first to reach this point. Van listens intently as a guard confirms the local rumors. The legendary man known as Gold is indeed present in the town. Because he was raised in the remote countryside, the boy admits he has never heard the name, prompting the guard to explain that Gold is a world-renowned adventurer whose exploits have become the stuff of legend. The tales of his prowess are staggering. He is said to have single-handedly defeated the Demon King's vessel, annihilated 1,000 bandits in their own fort, and conquered every dungeon he encountered across the globe. Even now, his presence in the treacherous WRM Hell has left other high-ranking adventurers in despair, as his strength is whispered to be equal to that of the great heroes of old, far surpassing any monster. Contemplating these incredible stories, the young traveler wonders if such a man has already reached and defeated the master of this very dungeon. Deep within the cold, stone corridors of the labyrinth, a lone skeleton wanders, unaware of the approaching threat. Nearby, a group of concerned inhabitants, including a stoic orc and a gentle minotaur, hurry through the halls, coordinating the evacuation of those unable to fight while receiving word that one of their wounded is finally out of danger. As they move, the orc shares the intelligence he gathered on the intruders, identifying them as the legendary swordsman Gold and his companion Sylvia, a mage dedicated to bolstering his strength with her magic. He further explains the most troubling detail. These two do not seek gold or jewels, but are instead hunting for the Dragon Queen herself. The group exchanges worried glances, knowing that if the rumors of Gold felling an inferno ogre with a single strike are true, their time to prepare is rapidly running out. He and the other loyal subjects pleaded with their queen to remain in safety, but Ryuka was far too exhilarated by the prospect of being the first to reach the bottom floor after Van. She brushed off their concerns with a grin, her excitement for the journey ahead outweighing any sense of caution. Despite his insistence that she hide, she remained firm, declaring that she would watch over them and only step in to fight if they were defeated. Her subordinates grew increasingly frantic, reminding her that she was the primary target of the approaching threat. Moments later, the vast, tiled hall fell into a heavy silence as a lone, small figure stood guard at the far end, waiting for the inevitable arrival of the intruders. The heavy footsteps of the legendary man and his companions soon echoed through the chamber, prompting the orc to recognize the formidable warrior standing before them. He confirmed his identity with a stoic confidence, identifying himself as Gold, the legendary man, though his self-assured introduction did little to intimidate the monsters blocking his path. Standing their ground, the group of monsters declared themselves his opponents, refusing to let him pass as Gold coldly stated his objective: the death of the Black Dragon Queen, Obsidian. Stepping forward with a growl, the small mutant kobold questioned the validity of the warrior's legendary status, deciding to be the first to test his strength. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged at the armored man, who barely flinched as he tracked the creature's movement with a sharp, focused gaze. The encounter ended in a flash as the legendary warrior struck the kobold down with a single, devastating blow, leaving the other monsters in a state of shock as he remarked on how often people underestimated his power, confirming that the legends surrounding him were indeed true. Before the dust could settle, another defender took to the air, diving toward the knight with a swift, winged strike as he prepared his massive blade for the next challenger. Sylvia rushes to the fallen kobold's side, her voice filled with concern as she asks if he is all right. Nearby, the veteran warrior observes that the creature's defense was impressive, having only suffered a minor bump from such a powerful strike. He then turns his attention to the young mage, instructing her to retreat and focus on guarding the Dragon Queen alongside the orc. She nods in understanding, stepping back to allow the heavy hitters to take center stage. Without another word, the armored man lunges forward, his massive blade clashing against the Minotaur's weapon in a shower of sparks and grinding metal. The beastly warrior is taken aback by the sheer force of the impact, realizing that he has finally met someone who can match the strength he once saw in the young boy, Van. A grim, satisfied smile spreads across the veteran's face as he acknowledges the thrill of the duel. He admits that his excitement is growing, fueled by the prospect of eventually facing the Black Dragon Queen herself, for he truly lives only for the challenge of fighting the strong. His opponent, however, seems lost in his own reflections, musing aloud about how many years it has been since he found a worthy foe in this dungeon. The onlookers can't help but notice how uncharacteristically talkative the massive creature has become in the heat of battle, declaring that only Van Kuyen had ever pushed him this far. The Minotaur vows to unleash his full power, while the knight readies his stance, prepared to seize the initiative. They charge once more, two titans of strength converging in the center of the chamber with weapons raised high. The resulting collision is earth-shattering, a violent explosion of power that draws a worried cry from the Dragon Queen as the Minotaur roars his defiance, sworn to protect the place where his masters belong. So intense is their struggle that the very foundations of the dungeon begin to fail, with the ceiling cracking and raining debris down upon the startled observers. He watches in horror as the ceiling finally gives way, the structural integrity of the chamber failing under the weight of the battle. Debris rains down toward the young mage, standing vulnerable below. Seeing the danger, the veteran warrior bellows a desperate warning for her to move, but the falling stone is already upon her. The others can only watch, frozen in a moment of pure panic as the shadow of the rubble looms over the girl. His warning is punctuated by a blur of motion as the young boy sweeps her into his arms, his feet skidding across the stone floor as he narrowly clears the impact zone. This sudden intervention leaves the entire group stunned, their faces a mosaic of disbelief and confusion at the boy's incredible speed and timing. Once they are clear of the immediate danger, he gently checks on her, asking if she is unharmed. She looks up at him, a spark of recognition lighting her eyes as she realizes he is the same boy they encountered earlier in the depths. As the boy tends to the girl, the armored man admits the rescue was a commendable act, but the massive beast man erupts in a fit of jealous rage, demanding to know what the boy thinks he is doing with her. He continues his frantic outburst, declaring that he had misjudged the situation and that this heroine-faced girl is actually their true enemy, all while the Dragon Queen's silent fury begins to boil over in the background. His words are cut short by a heavy, ominous rustle that fills the air, a precursor to a shift in the atmosphere that chills the very marrow of those present. They all gasp in unison, their previous arguments forgotten as a wave of pure, unadulterated pressure washes over them from behind. She stands trembling, her eyes wide and dark with a terrifying, jealous wrath that seems to vibrate through the very walls of the dungeon. While the tension in the dungeon remains high, a record of the mutant kobold Wolkoen reveals his hidden depths. Though he currently lies unconscious, he is an executive member of WIRM Hell, possessing hands harder than steel and fangs capable of shattering diamond. Curiously, the fierce warrior is noted for his preference for slimming clothes, a stark contrast to his monstrous power. A massive, ancient dragon head materializes behind the young woman, its presence so overwhelming it leaves the veteran warrior gold speechless. Ryuka's fury manifests as a palpable, dark pressure that chills the air and causes the stone walls to tremble. Her eyes narrow into slits of pure indignation, radiating an aura so intense it sends the nearby monsters into a fit of uncontrollable trembling. Amidst the tension, Ven remains focused on the task at hand, still cradling the silver-haired girl in his arms as he notices the Dragon Queen's darkening mood. She clings to him, her voice trembling as she wonders aloud why their companion is so enraged, while he can only stare back in bewilderment at the sudden, terrifying shift in the atmosphere. Sensing the immediate danger has passed, the bovine warrior watches as the young man carefully lowers the girl to her feet, ensuring she is steady before turning his attention back to the source of the dark energy. He approaches the fuming Dragon Queen with a look of genuine confusion, waving his hands as he asks what could have possibly upset her so much in the wake of their victory. In response, she turns her back on him, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment as she demands to be left alone, refusing to acknowledge the dark cloud of jealousy still swirling around her. The two then engage in a bizarre exchange of rapid-fire hand signals, a silent language forged through years of shared history that leaves their companions watching in utter confusion, unable to decipher the complex gestures. Hoping to bridge the gap, He produces a warm meat pie and offers to share it, but she remains stubborn, crossing her arms and huffing a refusal despite the tempting aroma that clearly catches her interest. He stares at the rejected food in disbelief, knowing her usual appetite, while the monsters whisper amongst themselves about the Dragon Queen's inability to be honest with her feelings, labeling her as hopelessly dishonest with herself. The moment of domestic squabbling is interrupted when the armored giant steps forward, introducing himself as Gold and offering his sincere gratitude to the young man for protecting the girl. Leading Van to realize this is the legendary warrior his seniors had mentioned. He listens as the veteran warrior warns him of the escalating danger, suggesting a retreat while acknowledging the strength it took to come this far. This advice leaves him torn, his gaze shifting between his companions as the seasoned fighter proposes a plan. He should focus on protecting the young mage while the veteran handles the increasingly fierce combat ahead. While the mage reacts with visible concern to the proposal, a dark, suffocating aura begins to emanate from the Dragon Queen in the background, her face shadowed by a growing, silent fury. Sensing the tension, the silver-haired girl gently urges him to go to her, offering a reassuring smile and insisting that they will be perfectly fine on their own. He looks back at her one last time, finding strength in her confident wink before turning his focus toward the path ahead. The veteran's eyes widen in shock as the boy suddenly begins to march forward, bypassing the defensive line and heading straight toward the looming threats. With a quiet apology, he explains that he has kept his partner waiting long enough and intends to move on alone, leaving the armored warrior and the orc behind in a state of utter confusion. The seasoned soldier shouts a final warning, demanding he stand down because the enemies ahead are of a caliber only a master could hope to defeat. Ignoring the command, the youth declares with chilling resolve that no one will stand in his way, claiming the Dragon Queen as his own personal objective. A wave of pure, paralyzing bloodlust suddenly erupts from the boy, leaving the veteran trembling as he realizes the true, terrifying intensity of the power standing before him. He stands seemingly vulnerable, prompting Gold and the others to seize the moment. They rush forward, intending to back each other up while their opponent appears paralyzed by his own intensity. With a sudden, violent motion, the boy strikes, sending the massive Mino-san reeling back with a heavy impact. Gold can only watch in disbelief, his mind racing to understand how such a small figure could possess such overwhelming force. The veteran warrior breaks into a cold sweat, his breath hitching as he witnesses the raw power on display. Van offers a polite apology, but his tone remains firm. He explains that to reach his goal, he must overcome every obstacle in his path, including them. He stands tall, his gaze unwavering as he issues a direct challenge to the legendary man. Gold is left reeling, struggling to reconcile the boy's youthful appearance with the terrifying strength he just witnessed. When questioned about his motives, the youth simply points toward the Dragon Queen, declaring with startling casualness that she is his childhood friend. The revelation leaves the group in a state of collective shock, their faces contorted in confusion and disbelief. Gold stares blankly, his mind struggling to process the absurdity of the strongest dragon having an adventurer for a childhood friend. Nearby, Sylvia beams with pride, seemingly the only one not paralyzed by the bizarre nature of the situation. Accepting the reality of the situation, the armored warrior prepares himself, acknowledging that the boy's previous display against the monsters was no fluke. He is now genuinely curious to see the true extent of the power hidden within such a small frame. With a thunderous roar, the giant of a man lunges forward, hoisting his massive blade high above his head. He pours his full strength into the strike, the air itself screaming as the heavy metal descends. The resulting impact creates a blinding surge of energy, a shockwave so powerful that the onlookers fear it could level a mountain. They watch in awe, providing a running commentary on the sheer, destructive scale of the legendary man's full power. As the dust settles, the boy remains standing, having seemingly dispelled the devastating blow with a single, fluid motion. The spectators are left speechless, unable to even track his movements as he effortlessly nullifies the legendary warrior's greatest effort. He stands his ground as the legendary warrior lunges forward with a devastating strike. Sylvia cries out a warning for him to watch his footing, but the young man remains unfazed by the impending blow. As the massive blade descends, he doesn't even draw his own weapon, instead meeting the steel with his bare hands. To the absolute bewilderment of everyone watching, he catches the edge of the gargantuan sword between his fingers. The metallic ring of the impact echoes through the chamber as he holds the legendary weapon motionless. Gold can only stare in disbelief, his mind racing to comprehend how a mere boy could halt his full-strength swing with such casual ease. Without a moment's hesitation, he follows the parry with a swift, punishing blow to the veteran's midsection. The force of the punch sends a shockwave through the air, knocking the wind out of the armored giant. The warrior staggers back, gasping for air and reeling from the sheer, overwhelming power of the strike. While the onlookers marvel at the fact that he chose to use his fists despite carrying a sword, the young man simply stands ready, his expression calm and collected. Dropping to his knees, the defeated legend can only chuckle at the absurdity of his situation, his voice trembling as he asks how someone so young could possess such terrifying strength. He looks up at the boy, desperate to understand the source of this power. The answer lies in a decade of relentless struggle, as it is revealed that he has ventured into these depths every single month since the Dragon Queen took her throne. On each visit, he fought his way through the monsters inhabiting all 100 floors of the dungeon. Surrounding him now, the very creatures he once battled, the orc, the minotaur, and the small kobold, speak with a strange sense of pride, claiming that they were the ones who raised him through these endless trials. Sylvia joins them, her presence a testament to the bonds formed in this unlikely training ground. The veteran warrior is struck by the realization of the hell the boy must have endured, seeking strength through countless life-or-death battles. Yet, Sylvia and the others simply brush off the gravity of his words, treating the grueling ordeal as if it were nothing more than a common upbringing. Still, one question remains burning in the older man's mind. Why would anyone push themselves so far? He stares at the young man, demanding to know what could possibly drive someone to seek such insane levels of power at such a tender age. He listens as the boy responds with a calm, unwavering certainty, stating that the reason for his relentless training is quite simple. With a bright, innocent smile, the youth declares that his entire 10-year ordeal was driven by a single, pure desire: to finally be strong enough to see the Dragon Queen again. This blunt confession sends a shockwave through the gathered companions, leaving them stammering in a collective state of utter disbelief and confusion. The Dragon Queen herself is completely overwhelmed, her face flushing a deep crimson as steam practically rises from her head in her flustered state. Seeing her frozen in shock, he realizes this is the perfect moment to act, darting forward with surprising speed while she remains incapacitated by her own embarrassment. Before anyone can react, he firmly presses a meat pie into her open mouth, a move so sudden and bold that it leaves the onlookers questioning what they are witnessing. The tension breaks into a quiet moment of domesticity as the two of them stand side by side, rhythmically chewing on the savory snacks in the middle of the dungeon. As the flavors hit her, a sense of pure, blissful serenity washes over her, completely purging the previous chaos from her mind as she savors the delicious treat. Noticing her enjoyment, he offers her another portion, which she eagerly accepts with a joyful, light-hearted exclamation of thanks. While the monsters are swept up in the sheer adorableness of the scene, the veteran warrior stands back, his face contorted in a mix of exhaustion and total bewilderment at how the situation has devolved. The Black Dragon Queen, Ryoka Obsidian, stands alongside her human childhood friend, Vincerius, as they navigate the complexities of their shared world. Behind them follows a peculiar group of monsters: the gentle Wolkoin, the sharp-tongued Harpy-san, the stoic Orkin, and the romantic Mino-san. Joining the group is the serene human mage, Sylvia-san, who maintains a calm and prayerful composure despite their surroundings. In stark contrast to their ease, the legendary warrior Gold-san appears visibly shaken, his face drenched in a cold sweat as he observes the party. He stares in utter disbelief at the scene, unable to comprehend how high-ranking monsters are smiling and the Dragon Queen is casually eating pie while being led by a mere boy. His obvious shock prompts the boy to wonder if he was too hard on the veteran, though his companion remains entirely unconcerned about the man's mental state. While they discuss his condition, the mage steps forward to take charge, leading the orc to realize that she has yet to cast a single spell, signaling that the true display of her power is only just beginning. She gently pats the legendary warrior's head, noting that it's been a while since he felt so lost, though he seemed to be enjoying himself earlier. Behind them, the young boy and his monstrous companions watch in stunned silence as the formidable man collapses into her embrace. As she continues to offer comfort with rhythmic pats, the monsters erupt in protest, pointing out that the man they are coddling is the truly dangerous threat. Meanwhile, the boy quickly shields the Dragon Queen's eyes from the bizarre display of affection. The commotion draws unwanted attention from the surrounding crowd, with onlookers calling for guards and decrying the scene as scandalous. Despite the growing chaos and accusations of impropriety, the mage remains calm, though slightly overwhelmed by the public outcry. To settle the confusion, she brightly announces that they are actually a married couple, driven by her deep love for him. Beside her, the warrior remains silent, his face a mask of stoic endurance as the truth of their relationship is laid bare. This revelation sends a wave of pure shock through the monstrous trio, their faces contorted in absolute disbelief at the unexpected union. She laughs off their reaction, casually mentioning that they are the same age, which only fuels the monster's frantic cries about the perceived age gap between the youthful-looking mage and the rugged warrior. He finally speaks up to confirm the fact, stating plainly that they are both 35 years old, a detail they frequently have to clarify to others who are misled by their appearances. While the young boy and the Dragon Queen struggle to process this, she explains that she has been following the warrior on his adventures since he was a child, and they even have a 16-year-old daughter together. The Dragon Queen is left speechless by the math of their relationship, while the mage playfully teases the warrior about how much fun he was having being carried around by the young man earlier. With a proud smile, she makes a final proclamation. She and the legendary man have been childhood friends for 30 years, cementing a bond that spans nearly their entire lives. She has just dropped a bombshell that leaves the entire group frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. The realization that she and the legendary warrior are a married couple of childhood friends is almost too much for their companions to process. In the minds of the four monsters, a vision of paradise unfolds where they are welcomed into the warm, domestic embrace of this unexpected family. To them, this is the ultimate utopia, a dream of belonging they never thought possible. While the Dragon Queen remains flushed and speechless, they begin to weep openly. The monsters express a desperate desire to be part of such a beautiful family, hoping for even more children to join the household in the future. Overwhelmed by the purity of the revelation, the massive bullman concedes defeat with tears streaming down his face. He offers his heartfelt thanks, moved to his core by the couple's long history together. He and his companions continue to lament their own perceived inadequacy, feeling that they have no right to challenge or take anything from a couple who has built 30 years of history. They feel completely outclassed by the depth of the pair's bond. Flustered by the sudden outpouring of emotion and the cheers of his former adversaries, the armored warrior decides it is time to depart. He begins to lead his wife away, ignoring her protests as the monsters shout their enthusiastic support. Before he can pull her completely away, the silver-haired mage leans in close to the Dragon Queen, whispering a playful encouragement. She promises to root for the budding relationship between the young woman and her companion, leaving her target sputtering in embarrassment. She is left bewildered by the parting comment, struggling to understand the implication while the mage and her husband disappear into the distance. She watches them go, her face still burning with a mix of confusion and shyness. As she watches the couple retreat, the warrior bellows a final challenge over his shoulder, warning the group to be ready for their next encounter. The monsters, now friendly, wave them off and beg for more stories of their life together. Finally alone in the quiet of the aftermath, the Dragon Queen turns to the young boy and offers a soft word of gratitude for his protection. He exhales, weary but safe, reflecting on the bizarre and exhausting events of the day. He walks alongside his companion, his mind drifting to the strange but heartwarming dynamic of the couple they just left. Beside him, the Dragon Queen struggles with her own thoughts, her face flushed as she regrets her earlier loss of composure. The young boy then voices a sudden, innocent thought, wondering if the two of them will end up just like that seasoned couple when they eventually grow up. The suggestion hits her like a physical blow, leaving her wide-eyed and utterly speechless. In her flustered state, she accidentally stumbles into him with a dull thud. He remains blissfully unaware of her turmoil, simply expressing a hope that they can remain close childhood friends forever, while she reels from the sheer weight of his unintentional implications. She stares at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deeper meaning. Seeing only his usual, earnest expression, she realizes that he is exactly the same as he has always been, completely oblivious. A soft smile finally plays across her lips as she decides to let the matter rest for the time being. From the shadows, their monstrous companions observe the exchange, whispering among themselves about whether this awkward interaction actually constitutes any real romantic progress. Elsewhere, Gold stands before a crowd, his presence commanding attention as he recounts their recent exploits. He explains that after reaching the 50th floor, they have decided to rest in this town before making their final push toward the very bottom of the dungeon. As the townspeople whisper in awe of the man's reputation, he turns his attention away from the crowd. He spots the young adventurer nearby and calls out to him, interrupting the boy's quiet moment of refreshment. The surrounding onlookers are stunned to see the legendary figure speaking so familiarly with Fan. The veteran warrior declares that his debt to the boy is now officially settled, though he promises to return once more in the future. With the formalities out of the way, the armored man suggests they all find a place to eat and turn the occasion into a proper welcome party. The group agrees, the tension of the dungeon finally giving way to a sense of camaraderie. Upon arriving at the eatery, the imposing warrior surprises everyone by ordering a massive strawberry parfait with 2 spoons. The young boy can only watch in silent disbelief, realizing that even a legend has a penchant for the unexpectedly sweet. The hulking minotaur sits in silent contemplation within the depths of a dungeon, his massive frame settled into a meditative pose. He focuses his will, driven by a singular, burning desire to transcend his current limits and grow stronger. Closing his eyes tight, he attempts to purge all distractions and achieve a state of perfect mental clarity. The weight of his ambition presses upon him, a silent vow to push past the boundaries of his own strength. Elsewhere, the young adventurer is approached by his draconic companion, who inquires about the nature of his personal training regimen. He looks up, momentarily surprised by her sudden curiosity regarding his daily routine. From the shadows, the Minotaur watches the exchange with a mixture of envy and frustration, finding the casual interaction between the two almost unbearable. He yearns to know the secret of the boy's strength, but feels his own status prevents him from asking directly, hoping instead that the Dragon Queen might intercede on his behalf. He envisions the boy's methods, simple, repetitive sword swings atop a distant mountain, and finds the lack of refinement almost insulting. To his disciplined mind, such a basic approach seems far too crude to yield any real power. The conversation continues as the boy explains that his training consists of nothing more than taking practice swings in his hometown, a revelation that leaves his companion skeptical. While the veteran warrior mentions his own mountain training, the Minotaur struggles to maintain his focus, his mind racing with the perceived inadequacy of the boy's methods even as he tries to clear his thoughts. Meanwhile, a dejected figure with dark wings and horns trudges through the dungeon, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She laments the day's failures, ignoring the judgmental whispers of those she passes as she reflects on her inability to fulfill her dark duties. A cold, disembodied voice echoes in her mind, dismissing her as a useless failure who has no place in the dungeon hierarchy. The pressure mounts as she is reminded of her inability to harvest life energy, her very existence now seemingly at stake. She eventually stumbles upon the meditating Minotaur, pausing to observe his strange, motionless state with a mix of confusion and curiosity. As she contemplates her uncertain future and the possibility of seeking a new path, she wonders what could possibly drive a creature of his size to such quiet stillness. She watches in stunned silence as the massive Minotaur sits in a meditative pose, his lips moving with a soft, rhythmic mutter. He seems lost in a trance, whispering hopes of togetherness and eternal love, a stark contrast to his imposing physical presence. Lost in his own frustration, he tries to force his mind into a state of emptiness, but the images of the Dragon Queen and the young boy, Van, continue to dance behind his eyelids. He curses his inability to maintain the discipline required for this mental training. The young succubus finally makes her presence known, but he is so deep in his internal struggle that he blurts out a demand for marriage, causing her to recoil in sheer bewilderment. He blinks, realizing he has spoken his stray thoughts aloud. He quickly attempts to explain himself, gesturing broadly as he describes his attempt at meditative training. He admits that his mind wandered into territory it shouldn't have, leading to the embarrassing verbal slip she just witnessed. Despite his explanation, he remains wary, convinced that her presence is a calculated attempt to disrupt his concentration. Meanwhile, she struggles with her own racing heart, finding his presence equally bothersome as she tries to maintain her composure. Shifting the conversation, he speaks of the nature of their environment, noting that despite the immense strength of the board members, they all strive for even greater power. She listens intently, her gaze dropping as she prepares to voice her own deep-seated insecurities. With a heavy heart, she confesses her failures, admitting that she has never once bested an adventurer and that her nerves always get the better of her during attempts at seduction. She questions whether someone as ineffective as herself truly has a place among such formidable peers. The massive Minotaur offers a comforting perspective, pointing out that even the goblins on the lower floors serve a vital purpose by allowing the dungeon to study adventurer tactics, despite their low success rate. He reassures her that mistakes are a natural part of the process. Continuing his explanation, he describes the unique philosophy of their dungeon, where the Dragon Queen's policy of nonviolence has resulted in a record of 0 fatalities. This approach, he argues, is what makes them a world-leading institution, valuing strategy and growth over simple slaughter. His words reach a crescendo as he looks her in the eye and tells her that her very vulnerability is her greatest strength, noting that her genuine distress was enough to move even the hardened members of the board. He encourages her to embrace who she is, leaving her visibly touched by his unexpected kindness. She listens intently as the Minotaur ponders his own nature, considering that perhaps his true purpose is to serve as a decoy, allowing others to find their opening. This realization sparks a sudden epiphany for him. He understands now that his previous attempts at conventional training were only serving to undermine his natural strengths. He decides to embrace his own eccentricities, imagining a future where his spirit can soar freely alongside the Dragon Queen and the young boy, concluding that a focused, clear mind was never his destiny. Observing his sudden shift in demeanor, she notes that he appears to be in peak condition as he strikes a confident, muscular pose. Over the following days, he dedicates himself to this new path of delusional training, while she, inspired by his resolve, decides to put in more effort herself, even playfully suggesting a beach getaway. Eventually, he stands before his comrades, wreathed in a powerful aura and claiming to have ascended to an entirely new level of existence. His enthusiasm is infectious, as the kobold claims to have inherited the power of Fenrir, the harpy boasts of reaching incredible speeds, and the orc displays the results of his intense muscle conditioning. Together, they form a formidable and intimidating line, radiating a newfound confidence that borders on the menacing. With a thunderous cry, he leads the group forward, fueled by the belief that they are now invincible against any who would dare intrude upon their domain. Despite their grand display, the Dragon Queen is far from impressed, delivering a stern lecture to the 4 of them while the young boy watches, questioning if any of them actually gained any real strength. He watched as the dust settled on their latest exploit, the chaotic energy of the dungeon giving way to a moment of unexpected triumph. Suxi-sen stood at the center of the celebration, beaming with pride and offering a cheerful thumbs up as the others lauded her performance. It turned out that her natural penchant for failure had served as the ultimate tactical decoy, creating the perfect opening for the rest of the group to strike. As the goblins rallied and the cheers echoed, a collective realization dawned upon them all. Despite their many quirks, they were truly at their best exactly as they were. Van and Ryoka find themselves confined within a stark, windowless room. They exchange glances of growing concern, wondering who could have orchestrated such a predicament. An hour earlier, the two had been relaxing when Ryoka excitedly suggested a snack break. Suddenly, a large, ornate treasure chest materialized out of thin air, much to Van's bewilderment. Despite his immediate suspicion that the chest seemed out of place, she couldn't resist the lure of potential treats. As she reached out and flipped the lid, a blinding light erupted from within the container. The chest's interior transformed into a powerful vacuum, dragging her toward its depths. He cried out in alarm, reaching for her as the supernatural force intensified. The suction proved too strong, pulling him in right after her. Now, back in the present, they find themselves pressed tightly against one another in the dark, confined interior of the magical trap. She gritted her teeth in frustration, lamenting the unthinkable situation they had fallen into. He considered trying to force their way out, but realized that any attempt to shatter the walls in such a cramped space would likely result in her getting injured. Unbeknownst to the trapped pair, their struggle was being observed by the very architects of the scheme. The orc and the Minotaur shared a sinister laugh, satisfied that their plan to ensnare the duo had worked perfectly. They explained the nature of the trap, a specialized mimic chest that creates an inescapable pocket dimension. Unless the captives met a specific, undisclosed condition, the magical seal would remain unbroken. As a mechanical maid served them tea, the conspirators settled in to watch the unfolding drama. From within the chest, her muffled voice echoed, demanding an end to their voyeuristic games. She remains silent as the harpy snaps at the small kobold, who is frantically barking warnings about forbidden acts through the bars. The creature's panic is repetitive and loud, his cries of "don't have sex" echoing in the cramped space. She and the kobold are ignored by the minotaur and the orc, who are busy discussing the magical inscription on the wall. The orc notes that escape is impossible without a specific, censored condition being met, while the minotaur expresses a sudden doubt about their judgment of the Dragon Queen. He declares with dramatic flair that the time has come for the captives to pay the piper, his excitement growing as he anticipates the spectacle. Meanwhile, the small kobold watches him, silently noting how easily the orc is swept up in his own theatrics. He joins the others as they stare at the cryptic message on the wall, the three empty circles mocking their predicament. While the avian girl is genuinely perplexed by the missing word, the two young adventurers share a moment of intense, silent embarrassment, their faces flushed as they contemplate the likely meaning. She is left to contemplate the missing word while, outside, the captors engage in a childish game of rock, paper, scissors to determine who will be the first to offer a guess. Their casual demeanor contrasts sharply with the tension felt by those trapped inside. He and the others eventually settle into a quiet wait, but the harpy finds herself questioning the moral character of her companions. She wonders aloud when they all became so preoccupied with such scandalous thoughts, feeling a sense of isolation in her confusion. She is interrupted when the boy turns to his companion and asks if this situation feels familiar, prompting a sudden spark of memory. The Dragon Queen freezes, her eyes widening as a specific, long-forgotten event begins to resurface in her mind. He recalls a stormy night years ago, when they were both much younger and sought shelter beneath the heavy boughs of a tree. Back then, the Dragon Queen was small and terrified, clinging to him for comfort as the thunder roared overhead. He describes how the tempest eventually passed, a story so unexpectedly wholesome that it moves their monstrous captors to tears. The orc and minotaur are overcome with emotion, their previous schemes forgotten in the face of such a pure, nostalgic tale. They are left weeping at the purity of the tale as the recollection concludes with the image of the clouds parting to reveal a breathtaking, star-filled sky. In the present, the shared memory brings a soft, genuine smile to their faces, momentarily erasing the walls of their prison. He has successfully moved their captors to tears with his childhood tale. The monsters stand in a row, their tough exteriors crumbling as they weep openly at the purity of the memory. As the monsters sob in the background, he turns his attention back to the Dragon Queen. She admits that her duties as dungeon master have kept her tethered to this place, as her mana is the very lifeblood of the labyrinth. He playfully teases her, labeling her a shut-in for never venturing beyond these walls. Because of her confinement, he proposes a solution. If they can find a successor to manage the dungeon, she would finally be free to roam. He recalls a specific location where the night sky is draped in an endless blanket of stars, a sight he wishes to share. With a warm, sincere smile, he promises that they will go to that place together once they are free. She looks at him, her cheeks flushed with a soft glow, and quietly agrees to the future he has envisioned for them. This display of pure affection sends the observing monsters into a fresh frenzy of emotional upheaval. While the Minotaur is already planning a wedding hall for the pair, the succubus laments the lack of scandalous developments, though even she seems touched by the sincerity of the moment. Suddenly, the heavy lid of the mimic creaks open, allowing a rush of cool, fresh air to flood the cramped space. Both he and the Dragon Queen look up in stunned silence, surprised by the sudden change in their predicament. The realization dawns on the monsters that the trap's specific, unwholesome requirement was bypassed by a linguistic misunderstanding. They conclude that the mimic mistook the pair's intimate, heartfelt conversation for the pillow talk it was programmed to detect, proving that even a trap can be fooled by genuine emotion. Despite the failure of their original, more devious plans, the group finds satisfaction in the outcome. They take pride in having fostered such a tender atmosphere, even if it wasn't the scandalous result they initially sought. A sense of camaraderie fills the air as they all share a laugh, celebrating the unexpected success of their ordeal. The tension of the trap has completely evaporated, replaced by a newfound bond between the captives and their eccentric wardens. However, the physical reality of their situation remains as the chest begins to shift and groan under their collective weight. Inside the dark, confined space, limbs are tangled and wings are stepped on, leaving them to wonder exactly how they will manage to extract themselves from the mimic's maw. The Orkin, is visibly irritated as he doubles down on his questionable scheme. He shouts that the entire reason for their plan to bully the Dragon Queen was to force her into tears, allowing the young boy to step in and offer comfort. Also, they could witness a moment of pure, soft emotion. He is immediately challenged by the small kobold, Wolkuin, who points an accusing finger while his voice rises in protest. The kobold dismisses the orc's logic as nothing more than a bruised ego and labels the act of making a girl cry as nothing short of treason against their lady. They continue their chaotic bickering in the background as a tray of tea is set down with a sharp clink. A calm, detached voice observes that the entire gathering has descended into a state of utter abnormality. Their environment becomes palpable and awkward as the maid Golem arrives. She stands stoically with her tray, politely inquiring if anyone would care for a cup of black tea. She begins to serve the beverages, her movements precise and mechanical. When the bovine warrior offers his thanks, she simply tilts her head in a silent, curious gesture as the sound of tea being poured fills the silence. Suddenly, Her helpfulness takes a dark turn as she announces that she has handcuffs, explosive magic, and love potions ready for use. The monsters recoil in genuine terror, frantically waving their hands and screaming that they never requested such dangerous items. This mechanical servant, known as Gusan, has been by the Dragon Queen's side since they were children, proving herself indispensable in domestic duties like cooking and laundry. However, her skills extend far beyond the household. She is a master of creating intricate traps, a revelation that leaves the surrounding monsters sweating with unease as they realize the true nature of the maid standing before them. It is revealed that she is the ultimate creation of the Trap Club, a group of expert golem makers among the orc subordinates. Despite her artificial nature, she possesses a subtle depth of emotion that even her creators find impressive, standing as a testament to their craftsmanship. She continues her explanation, clarifying that since Orkin is her creator's master, he is essentially her grandfather. This revelation leaves the orc reeling, as he desperately protests that he is only 26 years old and far too young for such a title. Despite his protests, she remains focused on her primary concern, the developing relationship between the Dragon Queen and the young boy. She claims to have analyzed their bond perfectly, though her dismissive attitude toward her grandfather continues to grate on him. The tension causes a sharp crack to spiderweb across her glasses as she commands them to cease their hurtful remarks. She openly questions the necessity of these self-proclaimed monsters who insist on watching over the pair from the shadows, wondering if their presence is truly required. In response, the Minotaur and the Orc attempt to justify their presence, claiming they are entrusted with the Queen's protection in ways she cannot imagine. However, the Golem remains unimpressed, bluntly labeling them as frequent troublemakers who appear far too often for their own good. Her sharp tongue leaves the Minotaur feeling insulted, while the Orc begins to have a moment of uncomfortable self-reflection. He realizes that their methods, like hiding in bathrooms to observe, might indeed be perceived as more than a little strange by those they are meant to serve. Having said her piece, she prepares to depart to prepare snacks, leaving the group with a final, biting instruction. She tells them to return to their usual habits of breaking through walls to watch over the couple as she makes her exit. Elsewhere, the rhythmic chime of a clock echoes through the room where the young hero and the Dragon Queen have been engrossed in a game. The afternoon has slipped away unnoticed during their intense match of strategy. He suddenly realizes how late it has become, his stomach letting out a loud, traitorous growl that punctuates the silence. They have lost track of time entirely, having played 20 games in a row without a break. Seeing his hunger, she looks away with a faint blush dusting her cheeks, her usual commanding presence softened. She hesitantly suggests that he might want to stay and have dinner at her place, just for this evening. He accepts the invitation with immediate, wide-eyed enthusiasm. Soon, they are seated before a magnificent spread of roasted meats, fresh fish, and various delicacies, a far cry from a simple snack. He sits across from the Dragon Queen, slightly taken aback by her sudden demand to be addressed as a princess. She insists on the title, calling him a rude peasant, while the mechanical maid encourages them both to eat their fill and not hold back. As the meal continues, he reflects on his past, sharing stories of the chaotic but warm dinners he shared with Goro and his wife. He notes how Sylvia's love stories about them were always a bit wild, while Ryuka listens intently to these glimpses into his former life. The atmosphere softens as she admits that while she is accustomed to solitary meals, the act of conversing while eating is surprisingly pleasant. Unbeknownst to them, a group of onlookers watches from the shadows, whispering about how the pair resembles a newlywed couple. This observation seems to trigger a sudden realization within the mechanical maid. She watches them bicker over their vegetables and meat, her internal logic processing their interaction through a new, romantic lens. Without warning, the maid suggests a bold course of action, prompting the boy to lick a stray bit of sauce from the queen's cheek. The suggestion is so outrageous that the Dragon Queen immediately spits out her drink in a spray of pure shock. She recoils, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment as she demands to know why such a thing would ever make her happy. Beside her, the boy is left coughing and sputtering, caught completely off guard by the maid's bluntness. The maid remains undeterred, stating with mechanical certainty that her suggestion was based on the obvious fact that the queen loves him. The declaration hangs in the air, leaving the hidden observers in a state of absolute disbelief. Panic takes hold of the queen as she frantically waves her hands in denial, shouting that they share no such relationship and are merely childhood friends. Her energy is so intense that it radiates outward, a visible manifestation of her flustered state. Turning her frustration toward the shadows, she accuses the hidden monsters of orchestrating the entire awkward encounter. They scramble to defend themselves, insisting they are merely innocent bystanders to her display of denial. Attempting to reclaim some shred of dignity, she huffs and suggests they simply finish their meal while she continues her lecture. Behind her, the monsters can only marvel at what they perceive to be the perfect display of a conflicted heart. She watches as the group dives into their meal with gusto. The air is filled with the sounds of satisfied chewing as the monsters feast, though the peace is briefly interrupted when the orc chides the harpy for her frantic, hurried pace. Seeing her companions so content brings a genuine, radiant smile to the Dragon Queen's face, her cheeks flushed with a rare warmth. From the shadows of the hallway, the maid Golem observes this display of soft vulnerability with silent interest. She notices the maid's presence and warmly invites her to join the festivities. The construct politely declines, explaining that as a golem, she has no biological need for food or water and is physically incapable of consuming them. despite her desire to participate. The golem continues, stating that simply witnessing her mistress's warm smile while dining with everyone is more than enough to satisfy her. The sincerity of the mechanical maid's words leaves the dragon queen momentarily speechless and deeply touched. With a rhythmic clap of her hands, she declares that her own hunger has been sated by the sheer emotional warmth of the moment, echoing sentiments shared by the monsters earlier. Her cryptic, almost knowing remark leaves her mistress grumbling in confusion. As the meal winds down, a comfortable silence settles over the diverse group. The mechanical maid stands watch over the table where humans and monsters alike have shared a rare moment of peace and camaraderie, the tension of their usual lives momentarily forgot. Breaking the silence, the construct proposes preparing dinner for the young boy as well from now on. This suggestion sends the dragon queen into another flustered state. She stammers about it being too early or too much work, yet she carefully avoids saying she is actually opposed to the idea. He offers a compromise, suggesting he could bring meals from town to share. The monsters, looking weary and battered by the day's emotional intensity, agree to a twice-weekly arrangement. They've decided that enduring the Dragon Queen's presence more than once a day is their absolute limit. Inside the depths of a certain dungeon, a grand hall buzzed with the restless energy of a gathered crowd. The air was thick with the sound of chatter and the shuffling of feet as monsters of all kinds waited in anticipation. A voice boomed over the clamor, thanking everyone for their patience. Standing center stage, a dapper cyclops in a tuxedo clapped his hands to command attention. He announced with a wide grin that the WRM Hell matchmaking party was officially underway, sparking a wave of enthusiastic applause from the diverse assembly of creatures. Amidst the excitement, she stood apart, barely recognizable in a long-haired wig and a pair of thick-rimmed glasses. Her expression was one of grim resolve as she adjusted her disguise, mentally preparing herself for the task at hand, finding a suitable partner in this sea of strangers. Nearby, the mechanical maid observed the proceedings, noting that the event had been organized specifically to help the dungeon's inhabitants find companionship. It was a rare opportunity for monsters, who usually adhered to a strict hierarchy, to mingle freely, even if some of the lower-ranked attendees looked surprisingly elegant in their formal attire. The atmosphere grew heavy as the massive, imposing head of the Dragon Queen appeared, her glowing eyes scanning the room. She offered a word of encouragement to the participants, wishing them luck in finding someone special, though she added a stern warning to keep their behavior within reasonable limits. While the crowd erupted in cheers for their sovereign, the disguised harpy felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She had never been comfortable with these types of sophisticated social gatherings and considered retreating to the quiet comfort of her books. Her companions, however, had other ideas, suggesting that this event might be the perfect catalyst to bring their young master and the Dragon Queen closer together. When she revealed her intention to join the party herself, they were momentarily stunned by her sudden boldness. They eventually relented, offering their half-hearted well wishes as she prepared to dive into the fray. Meanwhile, the massive minotaur nearby seemed to be struggling, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the sheer intensity of the romantic atmosphere began to take a physical toll on him. Ignoring the chaos around her, she marched toward the tables with a newfound sense of purpose. She clenched her fists, her mind focused on proving herself to the Dragon Queen and showing that she was more than just a bystander in these matters of the heart. She was now fully committed, her eyes burning with a fierce, almost predatory light as she vowed to master every technique of adult romance. Unbeknownst to her, a familiar pair of eyes watched from the shadows, observing her dramatic transformation with silent curiosity. She was nowhere to be found at first, prompting the small, fluffy kobold to scan the room with growing concern. Wolkuin had come specifically to check on her, but all he saw were successful couples beginning to form amidst the celebratory clapping of the other guests. He eventually spotted her slumped over a table, looking utterly defeated. The spark of determination she had carried earlier was gone, replaced by a hollow, burned-out expression that left the little kobold wide-eyed with shock at her sudden transformation. Her mind raced, comparing the grim reality of the evening to the perfect romantic simulations she had played out in her head. Despite her meticulous planning, nothing was going according to her imagination, leaving her teeth gritted in silent, mounting frustration. She recalled her first attempt at a false identity, introducing herself as Pico, a 22-year-old art lover. While she tried to maintain a sophisticated air, the men she approached were put off by her intensity. One even noted how different she was from the harpies they usually encountered, finding her noisy boss more relatable than this strange persona. The avian woman had then tried a different tactic, attempting to find common ground by bringing up the young adventurer, Van. She hoped the topic would give her a certain dainty appeal and make her seem more approachable, but her nervous, high-pitched laughter only served to deeply unsettle her potential suitor. The mere mention of the boy's name sent the group into a panic, as the monsters were clearly traumatized by their previous encounters with the formidable youth. Far away, the boy himself let out a sudden sneeze, completely unaware of the chaos his reputation was causing for his friend's social life, as the monsters screamed in terror at the thought of him. She felt her spirit break after a series of similar, crushing failures. The weight of her social inadequacy pressed down on her, leaving her looking like a hollow shell, while the other partygoers whispered about the scary and strange woman who had tried so hard to fit in. The defeated woman finally stood up, announcing her intention to head back and abandon the festivities entirely. Wolkuin watched her go with a pitying gaze, while the stoic maid Golem simply encouraged the kobold to stay and enjoy the scene himself, noting that Harpy Sand's departure was perhaps for the best. She didn't go far, however, finding a secluded spot behind a pillar where she could watch the other couples from a distance. A sense of relief washed over her as she realized that this voyeuristic position was far more relaxing and natural than actually participating in the social dance herself. The hidden observer was now fully in her element, lurking in the shadows and judging the romantic progress of others with a mischievous glint in her eye. She watched a pair holding hands nearby, her internal monologue shifting back to her usual role as a connoisseur of others' love lives, finding the all-night battle of romance much more entertaining from the sidelines. She finds herself cornered by a boisterous skeleton draped in a tattered cape, who insists she join him for an after-party despite her clear discomfort and attempts to decline. Because of his relentless pestering, the skeleton, known as Lich Sama, begins bothering other guests, prompting the Cyclops announcer to attempt a polite intervention while onlookers whisper about the arrogance of the high-level undead from the 40th floor. Ignoring the social cues, the Lich continues his loudmouth boasting, claiming that as the boss of the 40th floor, he possesses the 3 traits every monster man needs: immense magical power, a high income, and a literal backbone, punctuated by a sudden, flashy burst of sorcerous flame. He smugly suggests that the ladies present have a rare opportunity to marry into a life of luxury, unaware that his vanity is causing Van and Ryuka to twitch with growing irritation nearby. Suddenly, the skeleton's bravado vanishes as a cold, paralyzing shudder runs through his bones, sensing a dark presence manifesting directly behind him. In response to the shift in the air, he glances back with a hollow, fearful gaze, realizing that his boastful conversation has attracted the wrong kind of attention. As the tension peaks, she steps forward with a chilling, wide-eyed grin that freezes the skeletons in their tracks, demanding to be included in their little discussion. Looming over the terrified undead with a palpable, menacing aura, she reveals her status as a direct subordinate of the Dragon Queen, her very presence radiating a power that dwarfs their petty floor boss status. She continues her psychological assault, lecturing them on the true meaning of domination and the constant, irrational fear that comes with serving the truly strong, while Van's own intense aura flares in the background, causing the skeletons to rattle uncontrollably. Moments later, the haughty undead flee the scene in a panic, leaving the other guests to shower her with praise for her cool-headed intervention, though she simply dismisses the encounter as providing much-needed guidance to the lower-ranked monsters. She is basking in the glow of her 15 minutes of fame, the crowd erupting in cheers and chanting her name. The sheer intensity of their admiration is almost too much to handle, but she stands at the center of it all, hailed as a leader among the monsters. Having learned that being true to oneself is the only way to navigate such chaos, she takes a moment of quiet reflection. Nearby, her companions watch with a mix of apology and pride, acknowledging that she is handling the pressure of her new status remarkably well. Watching from a short distance, the young boy and the Dragon Queen share a knowing look, confident that their friend has finally found her footing. They are certain that, despite the initial turmoil, everything will turn out just fine for her. Returning to the center of the festivities, she is offered a glass of wine to keep the momentum going and truly liven up the place. Accepting the drink with a grateful nod, she takes a long, deep gulp, eager to refresh herself and get the party back on track. She quickly finds that the alcohol takes hold far quicker than anticipated, and soon she is screeching into a microphone with wild abandon. Waving a bottle in the air, she transforms the hall into a scene of drunken chaos, her singing echoing through the rafters as she makes a complete mess of the celebration. She stares blankly ahead as the morning light or the sobering reality sets in, her mind afog while her companions look on with weary disappointment. When warned that the cost of the damages will be deducted from her pocket, she can only offer a dazed thought of gratitude for her high salary. A thunderous crash echoes through the stone corridors of the dungeon as a formidable new presence makes its entrance. Adventurers recoil in shock, their eyes wide with terror at the sight of the hulking, armored figure wielding a massive blade. None have ever encountered such a beast in this sector, and the sheer pressure of its arrival sends a ripple of panic through the ranks of those unlucky enough to be present. This chaotic scene stands in stark contrast to the events of the previous day, when a sense of quiet desperation filled the monster's quarters. Wolkuin paced nervously, his fluffy fur bristling as he looked toward his companions with an expression of pure dread. He confessed his blunder with a heavy heart, explaining that a scheduling error had left the beginner area completely devoid of monsters for the following day. The realization that the dungeon's first line of defense was empty left the group in a state of stunned silence. As the gravity of the mistake settled in, the group debated their limited options, noting that every other high-ranking monster was already occupied with their own duties. Amidst the growing concern, a small but determined goblin named Gobsen stepped forward, volunteering to face the invaders alone to protect the dungeon's reputation, despite the obvious dangers such a task posed to someone of his stature. He watched the exchange silently, his gaze drifting as Ryuka and Wolkuin continued to bicker over the logistics of their secret identities. Ryuka reminded the group that as high-level bosses, they couldn't risk exposing themselves so early in the adventurer's journey, leaving the burden of the beginner area squarely on the shoulders of the lower-level staff. By the following morning, the bravado of the previous day had begun to wane as Gobsen sat alone in the cold, damp corridors of the dungeon. As the designated leader of the lower-level monsters for the day, he felt the crushing weight of responsibility, his earlier confidence replaced by a gnawing sense of anxiety as he waited for the first signs of an intrusion. The silence was suddenly shattered by the heavy, rhythmic thud of approaching footsteps, signaling the arrival of a powerful force. Stealing his resolve, the small goblin gripped his club tightly, deciding that regardless of the odds, he would give everything he had to defend his post. A massive shadow soon loomed over him, cast by a towering warrior clad in heavy, horned plate armor that gleamed menacingly in the dim light. This was the rookie monster that had been whispered about, a figure whose presence commanded immediate respect and fear, though behind the cold steel of the visor, a familiar determination burned. This transformation had been set in motion the day before, when the young man had appeared before his friends wearing a sturdy, horned helmet he had acquired from the weapons shop. He explained that upon Orkin's recommendation, he would be stepping into the role of a rookie monster to fill the gap in the dungeon's defenses. He fully embraced his new identity as Pan, a half-goat monster, donning a pair of furry leggings to complete the disguise. Confident that the armor would keep his true face hidden from both invaders and allies alike, he saw this as the perfect opportunity to contribute to the dungeon's operations and finally begin working off the mounting debt he owed. He charges into the fray as the battle commences, his heavy armor clanking with every stride. Beside him, the goblin leader lets out a piercing shriek, though the reason for his sudden outburst remains unclear to the armored youth. The small commander turns his fury toward his new recruit, berating him for his excessive strength. He explains that those were A-level adventurers who needed to reach at least the 30th floor, and crushing them so early was a tactical blunder. Continuing his lecture, the goblin clarifies the delicate balance required when facing lower-ranked challengers. The goal is to defeat them just enough to harvest their mana without inflicting permanent harm, a level of professional dedication that leaves the boy in the suit of armor deeply impressed. A massive orc joins the discussion, noting that a B-level duo is currently ascending toward the 29th floor. He instructs the rookie to observe his movements closely, while the goblin leader continues to grumble about the incompetence he has to manage. Suddenly, a cackling goblin subordinate leaps into the path of the oncoming invaders, his laughter echoing through the stone corridor. He seems confident, perhaps too much so, as he prepares to engage the intruders. The bravado is short-lived as the goblin is instantly flattened by a crushing blow, leaving the leader Agape in shock. With their comrade incapacitated, the command is barked for the armored rookie to step up and show what he can do. He lunges forward with newfound resolve, his movements fluid despite the weight of his disguise. Executing a powerful spinning strike, he feels a surge of momentum, marking a rare moment of genuine struggle in his long career of combat. The efficiency of the assault leaves the adventurers reeling, much to the satisfaction of the goblin leader. He praises the rookie's performance, but reminds him of the importance of recognizing recurring challengers and their specific skill levels. The orc interrupts to provide a warning about certain formidable individuals to watch out for, specifically mentioning a legendary warrior and a strange boy with dead eyes named Van. Hearing his own name and unflattering description causes the disguised youth to pause in silent bewilderment. As he processes this irony, the goblin leader flashes a toothy grin, summarizing the philosophy of the dungeon's lower depths. Fighting at the opponent's level ensures a good challenge for everyone involved. It is a lesson in restraint that the young hero takes to heart, feeling confident in his ability to play the part. He watches as the goblin leader barks orders, realizing the sheer amount of maintenance required to keep the dungeon running. Traps need resetting and walls need repairing after every encounter, a side of dungeon life he had never considered. This realization weighs on him. The lower levels are a constant hive of activity, far more demanding than he ever imagined. Even a conqueror of the dungeon has much to learn about the daily grind of its inhabitants. The goblin leader suddenly tenses, pointing toward an approaching party of adventurers. He identifies a balanced group of mid-tier threats, a swordsman, a rogue, a mage, and a healer, and instructs the young recruit to hold them off for exactly 5 minutes before retreating. He is struck by the goblin's perspective, seeing the dedication of a creature who has spent a decade honing this delicate balance. The veteran monster offers a rare word of praise, noting how quickly the newcomer is adapting to the professional standards of the floor. However, the routine is shattered by the arrival of a far more formidable duo. The monsters whisper in hushed, terrified tones as the legendary warrior and his young companion step into view, their presence alone enough to send a ripple of dread through the ranks. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, the goblin leader urges his pupil to brace himself. The legendary man is not an opponent to be taken lightly, and the time for practice is over. The warrior doesn't wait, unleashing a devastating display of power that scatters the lesser monsters like leaves in a storm. He stands amidst the chaos, his expression one of bored disappointment at the lack of a true challenge. His gaze locks onto the disguised boy, and a smirk plays across his rugged features. He calls out the deception, demanding that the weakling stop hiding his true strength and face him with everything he has. While the goblin leader watches in confusion, the boy realizes the gravity of the situation. To maintain his cover and the dungeon's ecosystem, he must provide a fight that leaves the legendary hero feeling satisfied with a hard-won victory. Steel meets steel with a deafening ring as he lunges forward, matching the veteran's strikes blow for blow. As they trade hits, he notes with a quiet confidence that while the man is powerful, his strikes lack the overwhelming weight he felt when facing the Minotaur. He takes the hit. Gold's massive blade descends with overwhelming force, seemingly ending the duel in a single, decisive strike. The veteran warrior is pleased, feeling the weight of a true blow as the impact echoes through the chamber. While he remains motionless on the stone floor, the armored man stares with a piercing, satisfied gaze. Both the young boy in the monster suit and his goblin companion play their parts perfectly, feigning a total defeat to end the confrontation. Satisfied that he has tested the local threat, the seasoned adventurer sheathes his weapon and turns to his companion. He laments the lack of truly worthy adversaries in this place, though he seems content enough to call it a day and head back with Sylvia. Once his heavy footsteps fade into the distance, the boy removes his helmet and exhales a sigh of relief. His goblin ally is still reeling from the intensity of the encounter, amazed that they survived such a reckless gamble, while the boy simply wonders if their performance was enough to satisfy the visitors. He remains seated, listening as the goblin expresses his deep gratitude for the assistance. The small creature admits that while the first floor is usually beneath someone of the boy's caliber, his presence today was a lifesaver for the local monsters. With a determined grin, the goblin vows to keep improving, prompting a warm smile from the boy. He responds with equal resolve, promising to train even harder so that he won't be the one falling behind in their future encounters. Elsewhere, the small, fluffy kobold bows deeply in apology to the goblin leader for the overwhelming workload he had been assigned. By the following morning, the atmosphere has shifted to one of growth, as the goblin seeks out further guidance to better manage his responsibilities. As they watch the boy depart, the kobold and the goblin share a quiet moment of reflection. The goblin speaks with certainty, noting that even among the highest ranks of monsters, the boy's potential is undeniable. He is clearly destined for greatness. Later, while resting with his draconic companion, he makes a startling confession. He wants to become a monster himself. The Dragon Queen can only stare at him in bewildered silence, struggling to understand the logic behind such a strange ambition. Regardless of the confusion he leaves in his wake, his reputation continues to grow within the halls of the guild. Rumors of the rare and powerful Pankuin spread like wildfire among the adventurers, turning his disguised persona into a local legend. The young warrior leaps through the air with newfound agility, his movements a testament to the growth he has achieved. Having fought alongside the monsters, he now makes a conscious effort to avoid harming them, choosing instead to deflect their attacks with precision rather than lethal force. He has changed recently, a fact that doesn't escape the notice of the watchful Minotaur. Mino observes the boy's progress with a contemplative gaze, noting the shift in his combat style and demeanor. The hulking guardian is not alone in his observations, as the other executives gather to discuss their opponent. They agree that while he still powers through the dungeon, he isn't truly scary anymore. In fact, they find his genuine concern for their well-being to be quite touching. They are soon greeted by the very subject of their discussion as he approaches the group with a friendly wave. Gura and Kai admit to one another that at this rate, they are likely the ones slowing him down, acknowledging that their strength is no longer a match for his pace. He offers a sheepish smile and scratches the back of his head, asking if there is any way they can let him through without a fight today. He claims to be feeling a bit tired, hoping for a peaceful resolution to their encounter. The others exchange looks of disbelief at such a rare request, wondering if it wouldn't be better to simply talk instead of clashing every time they meet. The idea of a non-violent passage seems surprisingly appealing to the weary executives. They begin to laugh, even suggesting they could make a special path straight to the top floor just for him to save him the trouble. Touched by their unexpected kindness, he beams with gratitude, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his former foes. He is suddenly silenced when a heavy axe thuds into the stone, as the Minotaur steps forward with a grim expression. Mino declares that even if it is a request from a friend, he cannot allow such a breach of protocol. He swings the massive blade with a roar, recalling the sacred duty entrusted to them by the previous queen. He bellows that it is their mortal destiny to stop anyone who attempts to reach the final floor, regardless of personal feelings. A sharp crack echoes through the corridor, leaving the young warrior completely stunned. The sudden shift from friendly banter to lethal intent leaves him reeling, his mind struggling to process the violent turn of events. He remains remarkably composed amidst the chaos, even as the Minotaur wails in despair and threatens to end his own life in shame. The others join in a chorus of frantic screams, their faces contorted in terror at the unfolding situation. Despite the literal cracks splitting the air before him, he simply stares ahead with an eerie calm, dismissing the concern of his companions. His unwavering gaze suggests a level of detachment that leaves the others frozen in disbelief. His unsettling stillness is interrupted by a cold, authoritative voice that cuts through the noise like a blade. A dark, menacing aura begins to manifest, looming over the cowering guardians as they recognize the presence of their true superior. Emerging from the shadows, the Black Dragon Queen stands with her arms crossed, her expression one of cold disappointment. Her regal yet terrifying presence immediately silences the room, her serpentine tail twitching with suppressed irritation. She lets out a heavy, weary sigh, questioning if her subordinates have forgotten the very purpose of their station. The executives can only stammer in response, their previous bravado completely evaporated in the face of her return. They attempt to plead their case, claiming exhaustion and a desire for rest, but she is unmoved by their excuses. Her mind drifts back to the time she first gathered these spirits, choosing them for their raw potential and strength to serve by her side. Her eyes narrow, flashing with a dangerous intensity as she asks if they truly intend to mock her authority with such pathetic displays. The mere suggestion of her wrath sends the guardians into a fit of desperate apologies, their bodies trembling with fear. Unimpressed by their groveling, she declares that since they seem so eager to fail together, they shall face a grueling retraining under her direct supervision. The prospect of her lessons leaves the group in a state of pure, unadulterated dread. Turning away from the disgraced guardians, she softens her gaze slightly as she addresses the young man and the feline girl. The girl can hardly believe her eyes, recognizing the powerful queen as the familiar figure she knows as her aunt. The group eventually makes their way into the inner sanctum, where they are greeted by the serene presence of the Serpent Queen. A joyful reunion follows as the young girl rushes to her mother's side, while the two queens exchange a quiet, respectful greeting, acknowledging the safe return of their kin. Ryuko explains to the Queen's Serpent and Sirius that she deliberately left the king behind, knowing his tendency to overstay his welcome whenever he visits. Far away, the king weeps over being excluded, while the queen clarifies that his official duties with other demi-human leaders have kept him occupied, prompting her own visit for a change of pace. Saki inquires about the potential loneliness of their current situation, to which Sirius admits that while mana recovery is a struggle, the group is finding their way. She continues, expressing that the company of the former executives and others has kept her spirits high, though Ryuko watches her with a knowing, silent gaze. The young girl's face lights up as she mentions that Van also makes frequent visits to spend time with them. Intrigued, the Dragon Queen asks how long this arrangement has lasted, learning that for the past month, Van has been a constant presence at their dinner table. Her questioning takes a sharper, more personal turn as she asks if Sirius is truly safe or if Van has made any untoward advances, sparking a flustered and adamant denial from the girl. She muses on the inevitable maturation of relationships, noting that such changes are universal among all beings, whether they be monsters or humans. The conversation shifts to a more somber tone as the Queen's Serpent speaks of the ancient cycle of conflict, reminding them that peace is fleeting and a new hero and demon king are destined to arise. She then poses a chilling question to Sirius, asking what path she and Van will choose when the world inevitably descends back into the chaos of war. She watches silently as the Serpent Queen begins to slither away, leaving the young man behind with his sword drawn and a look of utter confusion. He calls out, demanding to know the meaning of her sudden departure, but the woman continues her steady retreat down the long, stone hallway. Because of his persistence, she halts her movement and turns back, her presence suddenly becoming heavy and suffocating. She declares that if he wishes to continue his relationship with her daughter, he must first face her, the Abyssal Monarch, Rind Obsidian, a monster once feared on par with the Demon King himself. She warns him that she has not yet deemed him worthy of such a bond, and that in their upcoming battle, she will show no mercy. She stands firm with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable as he blurts out a bizarre and unexpected request, asking if she would take on a maternal, albeit dominant, role in his life. The sheer absurdity of the question hangs in the air, contrasting sharply with her stern posture and the intense, predatory gaze she maintains. Ryuka stands within the stone corridor, clutching a glowing orb as she grumbles about the cramped space. She triggers a blinding flash of light that erases the stone walls, leaving Van to stumble into a vast, open plain under a heavy sky. He listens in disbelief as she explains that they are still within the dungeon, having rewritten its construction formula to expand the territory to the size of a small country. She gazes at the horizon as a colossal, scaled tail descends from the clouds, warning him that passing this gate requires an adventurer to stake their very life. He stares up at the massive dragon limb, his heart racing as she shifts into a predatory stance and dares him to come at her. She beckons him forward with a confident smirk, her presence filling the wide-open space with an intimidating pressure. He draws his sword in response, the blade gleaming as he prepares to face the overwhelming power of the Dragon Queen. She lets out a sharp chuckle, her massive tail whipping through the air with lethal speed and precision. He springs forward, his body a blur of motion as he weaves through the path of the crushing tail, his steel clashing against its impenetrable scales. He lunges for a final strike, calling out his self-taught running/technique, though she easily parries the blow and mocks the weakness of his effort. He struggles against the overwhelming pressure as the ground beneath him rumbles and a massive, draconic presence looms. Ryuko observes his efforts with a critical eye, noting that he has been holding back his true strength until this very moment, even as the environment collapses around them. Despite his resistance, she goads him further, challenging him to strike with the intent to kill, while asserting that she herself has no such lethal intentions. He remains focused, his movements a blur as he navigates the chaotic battlefield, refusing to let her provocations break his concentration. In response to her provocation, the young adventurer declares his unwavering resolve. He will not kill, honoring a pact made long ago. His expression is firm, showing that his mercy is not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate choice born of his own history. Watching the exchange, the young girl contemplates her own role and the nature of their bond, realizing that her feelings and her desire to stay by his side remain unchanged regardless of the trials they face. She wonders what she would do in such a position, only to realize she wouldn't change a thing. She then explains to Ryuka that even with the title of Demon Lord or the complexities of human-monster relations, the core policy of the dungeon remains: no one is to die. She speaks with absolute conviction, certain that he shares this fundamental belief. As the conversation continues, she addresses the skepticism regarding their friendship, acknowledging that while they may stand on different sides of a conflict, their history as childhood friends transcends those boundaries. She admits she had never told her mother about this before, but the truth is undeniable. To illustrate this, she recounts a harrowing memory from their past when she was captured by bandits. He had saved her with such ferocity that he nearly lost himself to rage. She recalls how he was so angry on her behalf that he almost forgot himself, forcing her to intervene and stop him from taking a life. That pivotal moment led to a solemn promise between them to never kill another, born from the fear and trauma of nearly losing their humanity in the heat of battle. She remembers the look in his eyes back then, the fear of what he almost became, and how they vowed together to find a different way. Returning to the present, she expresses to her mother her desire to live a life of integrity so that she can always look him in the eye, while he continues to push himself to new heights. He remains steadfast in his belief that their relationship as childhood friends is something that will never change, no matter how the world around them evolves. Ultimately, they stand together, a testament to a friendship that has weathered trials and remains as strong as it was in their youth. Their shared smile reflects a deep, mutual understanding that transcends their current circumstances, proving that once a childhood friend, always a childhood friend. He stands firm, his gaze fixed on the challenge ahead while Saki and Sirius cry out in concern, warning him that the situation with the Dragon King is far from over. In response to his unwavering stance, Ryuka lets out a heavy sigh, finally acknowledging the depth of his resolve before testing him one last time by asking if he would truly risk everything just to see her. He scoffs at the notion, his determination unshaken. Preparing for the clash, the young warrior warns his opponent to protect herself, taking a deep breath as he calculates his approach, knowing he must bypass her formidable tail and neck to find an opening. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunges forward, unleashing a self-taught technique he calls the Destruction Slash, catching the Dragon Queen off guard with his sheer ferocity. The swordsman continues his relentless assault, forcing her to realize just how dangerous this confrontation has become as she braces for the impact. As the very ground beneath them erupts in a chaotic display of power, he maneuvers through the flying debris with an intensity that leaves her marveling at the sheer absurdity of his strength. Closing the distance in a heartbeat, he moves to strike, prompting a panicked realization from his foe as she struggles to react in time. Instead of a lethal blow, the youth executes a precise grappling maneuver, locking her arm in a powerful restraint that leaves her reeling in disbelief at his skill level. He maintains a crushing grip, causing her to cry out in agony as she realizes he has achieved a terrifying level of mastery, allowing him to suppress not only his own energy, but hers as well. This intense physical toll resonates far beyond the battlefield, as the Queen Serpent suddenly recoils in shared pain, leaving Sirius to watch in horror as her mother suffers from the connection. She finally yields, her voice strained as she acknowledges her defeat and pleads for him to release his crushing hold. The very ground beneath them begins to tremble with a low, ominous rumble, signaling the end of their intense confrontation. He remains silent, his gaze distant as he contemplates the sheer destructive potential of his own technique, realizing that the moment he lowers his guard, the power becomes nearly impossible to contain. His lack of immediate response irritates her, and she demands to know what that vacant expression on his face is supposed to mean. Having regained her composure, she explains that this sudden trial was a final confirmation of his growth, a necessary test to ensure he was prepared for the dangers that lie ahead. She admits, with a hint of begrudging respect, that he has indeed become much stronger than she anticipated. Nearby, the young girl sighs in exasperation at her mother's antics, unable to believe that the queen would go so far as to create a clone just to engage him in combat. She apologizes for the deception, noting that her mother has always had a bit of a difficult personality when it comes to him. As the tension dissipates, she turns her attention to the massive figure approaching, greeting him warmly as uncle, though he playfully insists that Papa would be more appropriate. The exchange highlights the complex, almost familial bonds that tie these powerful beings together. Preparing to depart, the queen entrusts the young man with a final request to look after her kin. He accepts the responsibility with a simple, firm nod, while the young girl watches the exchange with a mix of curiosity and lingering annoyance at her mother's sudden departure. The realization of what has transpired finally hits the girl, her face flushing a deep crimson as she grapples with her own ignorance of the situation. Her flustered state only deepens when her elder relative sharply corrects her, demanding she cease using familiar titles and address her with the proper respect due to her station. He watches the interaction with a look of utter confusion, struggling to keep up with the shifting dynamics and the strange introduction taking place. Meanwhile, the girl seems completely overwhelmed, her thoughts consumed by an unexpected sense of cuteness that she can't quite articulate. With the duel concluded, the queen explains that she must return to her duties, having slipped away from an important meeting just to witness this encounter. She bids them a hasty farewell, leaving the girl to send her regards back to her father as the royal presence fades. Elsewhere, the other high-ranking members of the realm stand battered and bruised, their bodies bearing the marks of a struggle they clearly lost. They look on in bewilderment, wondering exactly what kind of monster the young man has become to have fought so evenly with the queen herself. He and the other executives lay in a heap, groaning from the queen's overwhelming power. She explains that she had used 3 clones to handle them, a revelation that leaves them reeling. One of them tries to explain that they were merely moved to another room for a lecture, but the physical toll of her lesson is evident in their battered forms. She then turns her icy gaze toward the trembling group, issuing a final, lethal ultimatum. They are to show Ryuka the respect she deserves, or face death. The executives can only stammer out their terrified agreement as Van and Sirius watch the display of absolute authority. Turning away from the cowering subordinates, she addresses the 2 youths directly. Her expression is uncharacteristically somber as she imparts a final piece of advice, warning them to be wary of the one known as the great hero. She is met with the young girl's usual optimism, as the child remains confident they can handle whoever comes their way. However, the warning triggers a far more curious reaction from the boy, who wonders about the nature of a real hero, while the serpent woman reiterates the gravity of her words. While the queen's presence lingers, Ryuka pulls the girl into a tight, protective hug. She whispers a motherly reminder for her to eat well and stay healthy, a sentiment the girl warmly reciprocates. She then prepares to take her leave, casting a final glance back at the pair. She leaves them with a simple command to get along with one another, her silhouette fading as she moves away. As she departs, the King Minotaur arrives on the scene, his booming voice announcing the conclusion of the trial. He declares that the young man has been officially accepted, treated now as a son-in-law after proving his skill. The girl beams with joy, happy to have seen her mother again, even if the encounter was brief and intense. Deep within the dungeon, a fierce battle of wits is unfolding, though not with blades. Ryuka declares her turn with intense energy, summoning a high-level hero from a private collection to bolster her attack power. Across from her, Van remains unfazed, countering her move by pointing out a fatal flaw in her strategy that instantly deactivates her defenses. From the shadows of the stone corridor, Mino and a fellow guardian watch the spectacle with weary expressions. They can only sigh in exasperation as they realize the two are once again engrossed in another one of their strange, elaborate games. He continues the match, explaining that this isn't just any game, but a popular street card game called Brave Fighters. As they sit at the table, the young man clarifies the rules, noting that the heroes summoned are based on real figures, which only adds to the complexity of their duel. The young man then calls forth the legendary hero Goldmons, a figure of imposing stature and strength. Ryuka watches with a mix of curiosity and growing frustration, remarking on how the sudden appearance of such powerful figures makes the game feel increasingly unbalanced. He doesn't stop there, detailing the ruthless mechanics of the game where one hero must be sacrificed to pave the way for another. He explains that even legendary figures like Gold are merely stepping stones, a concept that his opponent finds difficult to accept given the perceived weakness of the strategy. With a confident smirk, he sets his final cards into place, completing his turn with a flourish. He taunts his opponent, claiming to have read her every move and prepared a counter for whatever she might attempt next, heightening the tension between them. Because of this meticulous setup, he is able to summon the Great Hero Prominence, a card with an overwhelming effect that destroys everything on the opponent's side of the field. Ryuka stares in disbelief at the sheer power of the move, questioning if such a devastating play should even be allowed in a fair game. She watches with a dry, unimpressed expression as Van throws his hands up in a fit of dramatic despair, declaring the card game an absolute disaster. With a touch of irony, she reminds him that he was the one who brought the game to them in the first place, making his current outburst feel somewhat misplaced. He quickly defends his choice, explaining that his seniors at the guild provided the game as a necessary warning because of her legendary reputation. While she questions why they haven't prepared specific countermeasures for a real hero, he points out the futility of planning for a threat that hasn't even appeared yet. After Sirius offers a warm word of thanks, his mind briefly wanders back to the power of the Great Hero card, but the peaceful atmosphere is shattered by a sudden, blaring alarm. The emergency signal echoes through the halls, instantly putting the sturdy Mino on high alert as the threat level spikes. Panic spreads through the corridors as the call for an immediate evacuation is issued, with reports of an orc leader in distress. Saki's face pales as she hears the frantic updates, her mind immediately jumping to the terrifying possibility that the hero has finally arrived to dismantle their home. The true source of the chaos is revealed as a group of powerful invaders from a rival dungeon smash through the perimeter defenses. They strike with overwhelming force, making it clear that this is a coordinated assault intended to overwhelm the local guards and seize control. They move through the lower floors with an air of arrogant boredom, complaining about the tedious walk required to reach their targets. Their strategy is cold and calculated. They intend to slaughter the small fry defenders until the dungeon's executives have no choice but to reveal themselves for a final confrontation. Stepping forward to intercept the raiding party, she calls out to the leaders with a voice that wavers between fear and duty. The unicorn-headed commander, Uni, halts his advance in genuine surprise, recognizing the familiar face of the woman standing defiantly in their path. He responds with a cruel sneer, mockingly offering his condolences for her inevitable return to unemployment. To him, she is nothing more than the trashy succubus he personally discarded, a failure who has supposedly hit rock bottom by seeking employment in such a pathetic, low-tier dungeon. She stands her ground against his insults, firmly declaring that she is no longer his subordinate and is now a proud member of this dungeon's community. Her defiance only provokes a burst of mocking laughter from the invaders, who find it hilarious that a dungeon would be desperate enough to hire someone of her meager skill level. Finally snapping under the weight of his arrogance, she hurls a stinging insult back, calling him an immature, horse-faced virgin and ordering him to get out. Her voice rings with a fierce, newfound loyalty as she asserts that this dungeon is a far better place than the one she left behind, regardless of what he thinks. Her defiance leaves Uni sputtering in disbelief. He rages against her kind, claiming her comparison between her former and current employers is exactly why he loathes succubi. He is visibly shaken by her words, clutching his head as his subordinates cry out in concern for their leader's sudden distress. Seeing the tension, the massive Minotaur steps forward with a heavy thud, his presence commanding immediate silence. He sternly demands that the insults cease, declaring that the succubus is no longer an outcast, but a cherished member of their own ranks. The surrounding crowd erupts into cheers at his bold declaration, their voices rising in a unified roar as they recognize the arrival of their own dungeon's elite guard. She can hardly believe her ears, her face flushing a deep crimson as she dwells on the word precious. The unexpected warmth of his defense leaves her heart racing and her mind in a whirl of confusion. Amidst the commotion, a local orc recognizes the intruders as famous monsters from a rival territory. Sensing the escalating hostility, the succubus tries to de-escalate the situation with a nervous laugh, suggesting they all just sit down for a meal instead of fighting. The tension is rooted in a deep-seated rivalry, as the two most powerful dungeons in the neighboring lands, Ogre Organs and WRM Hell, finally face one another through their respective executives. The four intruders stand tall, formally introducing themselves as the four heavenly kings of the Ogre Organs dungeon, their expressions a mix of arrogance and professional courtesy. Their avian leader adjusts his glasses, coolly stating that they have come to demonstrate the true extent of their power. The Minotaur narrows his eyes, demanding to know the true purpose behind such a provocative intrusion. As the standoff reaches a fever pitch, a familiar, regal figure steps into the light alongside the horse-faced executive. They reveal that their true mission was to escort the Black Dragon Queen, Luca, back to her rightful place. The unicorn-like executive explains the dire situation of his own dungeon. Their master, King Belphegor, was recently overthrown by the great hero, leaving a power vacuum that urgently needs filling. He insists that the Black Dragon Queen is the only one capable of taking the throne, as no one else possesses the necessary stature. He continues his boastful claim, asserting that no subordinates could possibly serve her better than his own team. This arrogance draws a sharp rebuke from the Minotaur Guardian, who questions how a stranger could make such a unilateral decision, especially since the queen is bound to her current domain and cannot simply leave. They suddenly reveal their true colors, not as conquerors, but as obsessive devotees. Holding up signs and cheering, the group declares themselves the queen's ultimate fans, promising to use their dungeon as a base to broadcast her unparalleled charisma and cuteness to the entire world, believing that no one in existence is better than her. They descend into a feverish discussion about her charms, specifically noting how adorable she is when she flirts with the young human, Van. This bizarre display of fandom leaves the local guardians frozen in sheer confusion, unable to process the sudden shift from a potential hostile takeover to an intense fan club meeting. They continue to bicker as the young human and his feline companion watch from the sidelines, trying to make sense of the escalating absurdity. While the catgirl worries about the threat of relocation, the intruders begin flaunting official merchandise, even offering to sell a supposed nightgown belonging to the queen at a premium price, further fueling the argument over who the true supporters are. They finally reach the limit of their patience, and the air crackles with competitive energy. With a thunderous declaration, the two rival groups of subordinates prepare to settle the matter of who is most worthy of serving the queen through a formal duel. They charge into a chaotic brawl, their battle cries echoing through the halls as the dust begins to fly. Watching the melee from a safe distance, the catgirl nervously asks the young human if he can avoid completely annihilating the intruders when he eventually steps in to end the madness. The delicate balance of world peace is often threatened by the bitter rivalries born of love. When two individuals find their hearts set on the same person, they are frequently swept into a fierce conflict, driven by a volatile mix of passion and spite. It is a difficult situation to navigate, as even a man with many virtues can find himself despised if his charm is perceived as a threat to another's ambitions. Before the current events unfolded, a group of 4 such individuals emerged, known to all as the simp rivals due to their shared and overwhelming obsession. The atmosphere shifts to a grand, bustling arena where the air is thick with the roar of an excited crowd. A mechanical announcer takes center stage, her voice projecting across the stadium as she declares the start of a monumental event, the deciding battle to select new attendants for the Dragon Queen. The tension is palpable as she introduces the two opposing factions, WRM Hell and Ogre Organs, who are set to clash for this prestigious honor. She continues her high-energy introduction, emphasizing that the 8 monsters chosen for this trial will determine the very fate of their respective dungeons. The warriors who will carry this heavy burden are about to be revealed, each one eager to prove their worthiness to serve under the Dragon Queen's banner. The first contender to step forward is Wolkuin, a mutant kobold. While his face possesses a deceptively soft and snuggly appearance, it hides a remarkably tough and powerful physique built for the rigors of combat. Following him is Happy San, a harpy celebrated for her incredible aerial speed and a voice of such intensity, it is dubbed Hyper. She is well known as the dependable older sister figure within the Wormhole Dungeon. The introductions conclude with Orkkun, a tactical specialist renowned for his mastery of traps and his blend of intellect and physical prowess. And finally, the group's reliable captain, the formidable Mino-san. These 4 warriors stand together as a team, though their collective dignity takes a visible hit when the announcer introduces them to the crowd as Team Forever Idiots. The name clearly catches them off guard, leaving them questioning the announcer's choice of words even as they prepare for the battle ahead. The arena erupts as the announcer introduces the formidable challengers from Ogre Organs, the beastly Pork-san, the tactical Gurus-san, the energetic Cat-san, and the refined Uni-san. They stand together in the spotlight, though the eccentric nature of their introductions leaves them feeling slightly bewildered. Despite the tension, the group remains composed, noting the surprisingly relaxed demeanor of their opponents as the crowd's cheers reach a fever pitch. One of the massive warriors declares their intent to prove they are more than mere fanatics, just as the announcer presents the judge, the Dragon Queen, gracing the arena in her human form. This sudden appearance of their idol moves the seasoned fighters to tears of pure devotion, leaving their more cynical allies to watch in disbelief. Away from the public eye, the young queen confides her worries to her companion, fearing that the deep bonds between the competitors might be strained by the coming conflict. Oblivious to her internal struggle, the challengers prepare to launch a swift and decisive assault, only for the announcer to step forward and reveal the first match. This revelation sends a wave of stunned silence through the arena as the first event is revealed to be a fan art showdown rather than a duel. Because of this unexpected turn, the rules must be clarified. Each team must create a portrait of the queen, with the most captivating artwork winning the round. She explains that a physical brawl would be far too brief, and that this unique challenge will provide a much more engaging spectacle for the gathered masses. She stands at the center of the arena, her voice ringing out over the roar of the crowd as she officially signals the start of the first match. The spectators erupt in a frenzy of anticipation, while the challengers from Ogre Organs exchange taunts with their opponents. Despite the absurdity of the task, the heavenly rulers seem undeterred, their confidence radiating as they prepare to prove their devotion through art. As the timer begins, they move with a speed that defies belief, their hands becoming a blur of motion across the canvases. The sound of frantic scribbling fills the air, a rhythmic swish-swish that underscores their intense focus. It is immediately clear that these are no mere amateurs. They possess a technical proficiency that leaves the onlookers breathless. Within moments, the first sketches begin to take shape, revealing the Dragon Queen in a variety of elaborate costumes. One depicts her in a dazzling stage outfit, while another captures a more playful, almost mischievous side of her personality. Even the stoic Mino is forced to acknowledge their unexpected talent, realizing that these fearsome warriors are, in truth, dedicated artisans of their craft. They finally unveil their primary creation, a large-scale portrait of the queen adorned in a whimsical bunny-themed attire. The crowd's reaction is instantaneous and deafening, a wave of approval that washes over the arena. Uni boasts that their skill was forged from a deep-seated passion, a hunger that drove them to master the arts in her honor. She then turns the focus to the judge's seat, inviting the Dragon Queen to deliver her verdict on the presented works. The heavenly rulers stand tall, their faces beaming with the pride of creators who know they have produced something truly spectacular. She leans in, her eyes scanning the vibrant colors and bold lines of the bunny girl portrait with a thoughtful expression. A small, genuine smile touches her lips as she admits her fondness for the piece, raising a glowing heart symbol to signify her official approval. This simple gesture sends the trio into paroxysms of ecstasy, their eyes welling with tears of pure joy. For them, receiving a like from the object of their devotion is the ultimate validation, a moment of triumph that transcends the competition itself. Meanwhile, the pressure on the opposing side reaches a breaking point as they realize the monumental task ahead of them. Mino mutters about the need to surpass the brilliance of the enemy's work, but the sheer quality of the heavenly ruler's art has left his teammates paralyzed with doubt. They look down at their own attempts, the stark contrast between their crude sketches and the masterpieces across the arena becoming painfully obvious. The silence among them is heavy, punctuated only by the realization that their skills on the battlefield do not translate to the canvas. She listens as Saki confesses her limited artistic range, admitting she can only draw certain anatomical features with any competence. Beside her, Pork-san grumbles that his talents are strictly limited to technical blueprints, leaving them all to face the harsh reality that they are warriors, not illustrators. She had set a high bar with her expectations, and now the weight of the entire competition rested on the Minotaur's broad shoulders. As he stood frozen by the pressure, the heavenly rulers erupted in mocking laughter, convinced that the game was already over for such a ragtag group of amateurs. He felt their scorn like a physical weight, but nearby, a quiet conversation was unfolding between his companions. The Dragon Queen leaned in close to the young man, her voice a soft murmur as she asked which of the previous artistic tributes he preferred, her curiosity piqued by his silent observation of the other team's work. They spoke softly, the young man noting how the previous drawings had exaggerated her features to an almost divine degree, a comment that sent a sudden flush of crimson to her cheeks. She turned away, her usual regal composure crumbling as she begged him to stop staring, the intimacy of the moment feeling far more intense than any public display. She was clearly flustered, but this display of raw emotion triggered something unexpected in the Minotaur. A surge of primal rage and creative fervor washed over him, a power he struggled to contain as he realized that their private whispers were being noticed by the very people they were trying to hide from. He suddenly exploded into action, his brush becoming a blur of motion that defied his massive frame. The onlookers could only watch in confusion as the warrior began to paint with a frantic, desperate energy, his movements fueled by a sudden, inexplicable inspiration. The warrior roared with the effort, determined to burn his vision into the canvas. He channeled what he described as an overflowing libido, a raw, unbridled passion ignited by watching the flirting between his friends, into every stroke of his brush. He finished with a triumphant shout just as the announcer called for the end of the round. Panting and covered in sweat, the Minotaur stood back from his work, urging his teammates to check the final result before the time officially ran out. He had produced a masterpiece of a different sort, a steamy and incredibly detailed depiction of the young man and the Dragon Queen locked in a romantic, intimate embrace. The level of polish and raw emotion in the drawing was undeniable, capturing a side of the pair that no one expected to see. It left the onlookers in a state of absolute shock, their minds struggling to process the scandalous energy radiating from the canvas. The team stood frozen, realizing that the Minotaur's passion had resulted in something far more revealing than they had ever intended. They could only stare in horror at the laughing Minotaur, who was far too proud of his creation to realize the trouble he had caused. The succubus shrieked in a panic, warning that such a vivid depiction would surely blow the young man's cover. But the artist was already lost in the joy of his own unbridled fantasies. He stands amidst the chaos as Saki desperately calls for help to stop his creative rampage. Nearby, Uni shudders with a sense of impending doom, sensing a dark energy emanating from the bickering group. Suddenly, the intensity of the moment becomes too much for the harpy, who erupts in a violent, fountain-like nosebleed. She screams her gratitude for the scandalous sight before her, even as insults are hurled her way for her over-the-top reaction. Because of the mess, the announcer declares a shocking turn of events. The Minotaur's drawing is disqualified for being ruined by the harpy's blood. With their teammate collapsed and the artwork destroyed, the team is handed a crushing defeat in the first match, leaving them in a state of disbelief as the victory is awarded to the heavenly rulers.